Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the joint meeting of the Senate Committee on Growth and Infrastructure and the Assembly Committee on Growth and Infrastructure. Will the Secretary please call the roll?
Senator Hammond. Here. Senator Hansen. Here. Senator Pizzina. Senator Spearman. Chair Harris. Here. Assemblywoman Brown-May. Assemblyman Carter. Present. Assemblywoman Dickman. Assemblywoman Gallant. Assemblyman Gurr. Assemblywoman Kasama. Assemblywoman Marzola. Here. Assemblywoman Brittany Miller. Here. Assemblyman Cameron Miller. No. Assemblywoman Peters. Here. Assemblywoman Summers Armstrong. Chair Watts.
Thank you. Please mark Senator Spearman absent excused. Assemblywoman Dickman and Assemblywoman Gallant present, and other members present as they arrive. Before we start, I'm just going to give some general meeting reminders. Go ahead and silence your laptops, cell phones. During our meeting, legislators and staff will be using laptops and other devices. Please do not take this as a sign of inattention or disrespect. We're requiring everyone to submit exhibits in an electronic format, and so we'll be looking at those. A few reminders about testifying before the committee. Please sign in at the table by the door. Give the committee secretary your business card if you have one prior to testifying. Please don't forget that written testimony can be submitted to the committee secretary or the committee manager by the close of business today if you so choose. When you get up and testify, make sure to clearly state your name, any affiliation if you have one for the record. Also turn off the microphone when you're done speaking. Each time that you answer a question, we're going to need you to restate your name in order to keep the minutes straight. We will have public comment at the end of the meeting. We're going to go ahead and limit that to 2 minutes per person to ensure that everyone who's interested in participating has an opportunity to do so. And again, if you have written comments for public comment, go ahead and provide them to the committee secretary so that they can be added to the record. I will not be limiting testimony on the bill today. Please do not take advantage of that. Otherwise, I will have to change my mind mid-hearing, and that never bodes well. Also, feel free to say, I agree with the previous speakers, ditto. That always works. I think that's everything, so we're ready to go. We'll go ahead and open up the hearing then on Assembly Bill 524 and welcome my colleague Chair Watts down to the table.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much, Chair Harris and members of the joint committees. For the record, I'm Howard Watts. I have the pleasure of representing Assembly District 15 in the heart of Clark County. It is my pleasure to present Assembly Bill 524 for your consideration today. So how did we get here? I want to walk you through a little bit of the genesis of this bill, and then I'll walk you through the provisions itself as it stands and provide a couple of updates. So in conversations that have been had, starting with NV Energy and bringing in a variety of stakeholders from labor to consumer advocates, community organizations, conservation environmental groups, customers large and small of the utility, we started having conversations about energy issues in our state. And one of the big ones that was kind of the starting point were concerns about reliability. And these concerns aren't new. So there was a docket opened by the Public Utilities Commission in 2020 to investigate some energy supply constraints that were experienced during that summer. California experienced rolling blackouts. Nevada did not, but we were asking customers to reduce usage, and I'm sure many folks, particularly in southern Nevada, remember those calls to save energy. In addition, in the Fourth Amendment to Nevada Energy's current integrated resource plan in 2022, initiated in 2022, the Commission has also opened an investigation regarding resource adequacy and planning to ensure that electric utility supply of energy is sufficient to satisfy demands and maintain reliable, continuous service. Some of the things associated with that, obviously we've seen some tremendous summers, even though we're experiencing a much wetter and cooler year so far. We've seen the past few summers just extremely hot, and those heat waves have put additional demand on our energy system. At the same time that we've had some of those issues with increased demand, we've also had issues with supply. Those same heat waves and droughts have impacted regional hydropower supplies. There have been just weather and other constraints on existing generation. And so there's been, and of course, there's the supply chain issues that we've faced in the wake of COVID and international distress and other things. And so all of those issues combined have posed a variety of challenges to our system. Now, our current statutes require that we do energy planning with our utility to look several years out and plan for demand, but still we have found ourselves running into some of these challenges, causing us to ask, what else do we need to do? In the latest, the Fourth Amendment to the Utilities Integrated Resource Plan, a natural gas peaker plant was proposed and approved primarily to ensure that we are able to meet some of these peak demand needs during those hottest, most intense times of the year when our collective energy use is at its maximum. We have this process in place, and yet we do have some of these concerns. And what I've also heard is there is concern that some of these things are coming forward through amendments to our integrated resource plan, which is supposed to be filed every 3 years. And so something needs to be addressed in terms of making sure that we provide reliable electric service. That is really one of the foundations of our electric service, particularly in this state with all the challenges that that peak use period in the summer puts to our community. The other challenge that we're facing is affordability. So I think everyone here has experienced the spike in all of our utility prices. That's primarily been driven by a spike in the price of natural gas. That is something that has led to folks' bills dramatically increasing. At the same time, there's also been concern about projects that have already been approved and whose costs are going to be recovered, but which have not yet been incorporated into ratepayer bills. And then finally, one of the issues is in these periods of peak demand, when reliability is also a concern, energy is in short supply, and when we have to procure it on the open market, we pay top dollar for that energy. And that is another factor that impacts affordability in our when it comes to our electric rates. So with these challenges, the objective that I looked to take on was to come up with a solution to address those. And I think the path forward in general is to support resiliency for our community. That comes through having more local clean energy generation. Having that is going to help us reduce our demand for energy on the open market during those times of peak demand. And it also continues to build on previous energy policy that provides not only economic development, but critically helps set us up for regional collaboration to meet these energy challenges. And then, so the question is, what method do we go about to try and reach that solution? And through conversations with these many different groups, what we decided to really focus in on is our energy planning process. And how do we strengthen that integrated resource plan so that we make the smartest decisions for the state, that we provide a transparency and a thorough review of these proposals for customers, and particularly balance those rate impacts. What we want is to have public policy that ensures that we are addressing issues of reliability, that we're addressing issues of affordability, and that we are continuing to develop clean energy resources, but that we also make sure that that is vetted through our regulatory system to make sure that we take a long-term horizon approach, and we make sure that we are making the best possible investments that we can, given the information, for the benefit of the ratepayers, balancing all of those different objectives. So this is the bill before you is the product of months of conversation and attempts at forging compromise among a broad range of stakeholders. It is not, as some of these policies that come forward towards the end are, a large, bold policy, in my opinion. That doesn't mean that it's not important, but what it is focusing on strengthening the process and taking the next steps to improve our energy process to make sure it's as efficient as possible, as effective as possible, and again, is balancing these core elements of developing additional energy resources in our state to improve the reliability of our local energy supply, and doing so in a way that delivers the best impact for our ratepayers. So, there were a lot of different ideas that were put forward. One of the key areas was this idea that we have an open position, a level of exposure to the energy market, and that by reducing that, we can make sure that we can provide a reliable electricity supply and reduce our exposure to those extremely high energy market costs. And so the question was, how do we do that, and how do we provide a balance of direction without legislating an outcome, without having all of the information before us as legislators that could end up swinging the scale too far and have negative impacts on ratepayers? So that was one of the aspects. Another issue that came up was how do we address energy supply for some of our largest consumers of energy in the state. There's been work at the Public Utilities Commission related to energy supply agreements. There were proposals to work on statute to address that, and that was something that there was a lot of consideration of. There's, of course, not only our large customers with the utility, there's also customers that have exited under the provisions of 704B. Ultimately, that was something that we decided not to move forward with, and to leave that process in place with our regulatory body. I do think that that is something that needs to be looked at, and again, that we need to make sure that that evaluation balances all the considerations and provides benefits to everyone. And I think there are some examples of ways that that can be achieved through our regulatory process. There were questions about how do we get more information as part of the integrated resource planning process. That was something that we worked on. There were proposals to change the process for how we procure our energy resources and move towards a more independent request for proposal process, that was something that ultimately decided not to move forward with at this time. And I think that is something else that can be looked at through a range of avenues moving forward. And then there were a few other issues that came up again, some of which we ultimately decided to move forward with and incorporate into the bill, some of which we decided not to. And the goal, again, was to try and come up with balanced policy that moves our state forward and is rooted in improvements to our energy planning process and making sure that that we have a system set up at our Public Utilities Commission, which is designated as the regulator for our public utilities, to gather the voluminous information that is at a level of depth far beyond us as a legislature, frankly, and to hear from other experts in this arena and make decisions that are going to be in the best interest of our state moving forward, and make sure that we have statutes that help promote moving us in that direction. So with that, I'll walk you briefly through the provisions of this bill. So we'll start with Section 2. Section 2 of the bill just provides legislative declarations. And again, I'll let members read through them for themselves. I'm not going to read them to you. But it really reinforces the importance of making sure that we keep rates affordable for all of our customers, making sure that we keep our electric service reliable for all of our customers, and then utilizing a strong planning process to do that through a mix of additional generation in our state, being able to have a reliable transmission to procure clean energy from across the region, taking on other measures that reduce our demand so that we're not needing as much energy in those peak periods, and then ultimately looking at ways that we reduce our market exposure and do that in a balanced way. Moving on, Section 3 of the bill. This provision is related to our general rate case filings. So this body passed legislation related to alternative rate making a few sessions ago. And as part of that, to help encourage alternative rate making, it changed provisions to limit general rate cases to being filed once every 3 years. This, in conversations with the utility, was brought forward as something that could assist by moving that language back to how it was previously and requiring them to be filed at least once every 3 years. There's also an additional provision in this section that ensures that the workload on our Public Utilities Commission isn't too great by ensuring there's only one case, one rate case under consideration at the commission at any given time. And one of the things that I just want to note about this, I think there are concerns that allowing more frequent rate cases is going to allow rates to go up faster. At the same time, these are for approved expenditures deemed prudent. And when we look at trying to prevent dramatic changes in rates and rate shock to customers, I think that this actually could be beneficial by phasing in some of those things over time instead of waiting and doing them all in 3-month or 3-year increments. So that's what that provision of the bill covers. Section 4 is really the main substance of the bill. And so Section 4, subsection 1 allows flexibility similarly to rate cases for integrated resource plans to be filed more frequently. This is important in the context of subsection 2 as well. So again, the integrated resource plan process is meant to be comprehensive, all-encompassing. It includes modeling of the demand that the utility is going to see for energy over the coming years, and then provides a range of different proposed plans to address that. And again, that's through a mix of new energy generation, reducing energy demand, and so on. And so, there's detailed financial modeling as well around the costs and benefits that those plans have. And we want to make sure that major projects are being looked at in that holistic light. And so that's what Section 4, subsection 1 aims to do. Section 4, subsection 2 is really linked with this, and so it directs the Public Utilities Commission to enact regulations defining the amendment process. A lot of concerns have come up from various participants in the integrated resource planning process that amendments have been coming very frequently, that some of the projects and amendments are extremely large, and they don't have the full timeline and the full analysis of the integrated resource plan itself. And again, we want to make sure that as much as possible, we're taking a comprehensive look at these projects that are going to affect our energy supply. And so this would direct the commission to define the amendment process a little bit better, because we don't really have any definition for it currently. And, again, what we want to do is make sure that we have a really strong IRP. Amendments definitely have to be out there. Things happen that we don't expect. Things change. We don't have a completely magic crystal ball. At the same time, what we don't want to do is have things missing from that full integrated resource plan that should be there, and have them come up down the line. We want to make sure that we are planning to deliver reliable, affordable energy at least those every 3 years, if additional issues are coming up, one of the things that got pointed to a lot is that perhaps we need to make sure that overall IRP itself is more robust, so that we can avoid some of the items that come up in the amendments within those 3-year time periods before another plan is filed. That probably does sound familiar to members of the Assembly Growth and Infrastructure Committee, as we just heard conversations about addressing thresholds for certain plan filings and having the Public Utilities Commission make those determinations. Section 4, subsection 3. So this addresses the issue of market exposure. It would clearly direct NV Energy to submit a scenario as one option for consideration in future integrated resource plans to close its open position, aka its market exposure during peak demand. This was included, based on many conversations and was requested both by NV Energy and by Labor to provide a clear legislative direction to reduce that market exposure. This, I think, in my mind, is a compromise that does that while still maintaining our regulatory process and not dictating one outcome, because it may be best that we only go 90% of the way there or 80% of the way there or so on, in order to find that sweet spot and that balance between getting the energy resources that we need and doing so in a way that delivers the greatest financial benefit for our ratepayers. Additionally, this mentions both a mix of in-state resources, so that's one of the critical things, as well as contracted resources from other states with firm transmission. So, within the state, our utility has both utility-owned and operated assets, as well as contracted power generation facilities that are on a power purchase agreement, where we essentially just buy the energy at a set cost. This also envisions contracting with energy supply outside the state through similar power purchase agreements, and making sure that we have dedicated transmission to get it here. We have seen in periods of peak demand issues with energy moving through other states that are also in need of it, and that leading to certain issues. So trying to make sure that that firm transmission is available. Section 4.4, this is the section of the bill that really expands the information that is submitted in scenarios. And this, the genesis of this started with what should be included in the backup for this proposal to close the open position. In conversations with others, it was brought up that it would be beneficial to have more information submitted about the various range of scenarios that exist in the Integrated Resource Plan currently. In statute, we direct a low carbon scenario to be submitted, and you can see that again back in section 4, subsection 3, right above the added language. But again, there are other scenarios that the utility submits as well, and so we wanted to make sure that we're getting the most information possible to evaluate and figure out what is best. And you know, there's been concerns as well that sometimes there's not as robust of an analysis of a scenario that is. And so this lays out a range of information that we would like to have submitted. For each project that is proposed, we would like to know about every generation, storage, and other energy resource that the utility is considering, including the cost, the ownership, and the late. And I'll actually get to that with the amendment as well. And then for the overall scenario, for each scenario that's provided as part of the planning process, understanding what's the impact going to be on our exposure to the market, and is that going to reduce it? Understanding, is this going to diversify our energy supply, and particularly diversify our clean energy supply? There's a range of things out there, especially as we look regionally, that we can use to really strengthen our overall energy portfolio. It looks at our ability to access energy from our regional neighbors, and how it puts us on track to meet our clean energy and climate goals. So we have both greenhouse gas reduction goals in statute, as well as clean energy targets required through our state's renewable portfolio standard, which currently sits at 50% by the year 2030. It also includes information about demand reduction. So how does this scenario also look at reducing the demand side of the equation so that we don't have to secure as much generation? And finally, it looks at cost and make sure that those considerations are taken into play. And I would say certainly this is about, one of the concerns that's been brought up is that cost becomes an overriding factor. I think it is an extremely important factor for all of our utility customers. But it's not, in my mind, this has to be a cost-benefit analysis. We have to look at the risks, we have to look at the expenses, and we have to look at the benefits that we're expected to gain, and balance all of those things out in making a decision. And that is certainly what is aimed at here. That final section also mentions the unique federal funding opportunity. I'm sure several of you have heard about from my other bill presentations about efforts to make sure that we're securing federal funding. And there is a range of federal funds available for clean energy projects over the next several years. There's a significant opportunity to utilize those and make sure that we get those benefits delivered to customers. And again, from a variety of different things, whether it's clean energy projects, energy storage, and so on. And so we want to make sure that the impact of those federal benefits and how they are projected to reach ratepayers is included of an integrated resource plan. It's currently encouraged. There are definitely a variety of ways that folks can participate. This would just codify that there be at least one session prior to a plan being submitted to go over it with interested parties and get feedback on the plan, hear about potential improvements. The goal is to hopefully inform and strengthen that plan in it before it even starts its way through the official process at the PUC, and improve the outcomes that we're getting. And so that really are the provisions of the bill. Everything else is just conforming language. And so, again, with that, we want to make sure that we are looking ahead to the future and addressing the energy challenges that we are going to face. And we want to do that in a responsible way. And to me, again, the best way to do that is to look toward the expert regulatory arena that we have for these decisions, to make sure that we're pulling in more information, that we're honing in that process, and that we're asking for an even broader array of ideas to be brought forward so that we can ultimately make the decisions that are going to be in the best interest of our state moving forward. So with that concludes my presentation of the bill, Madam Chair. I am glad to answer. I will speak briefly. You should all have a conceptual amendment in front of you. There are really 3 items in it. The first one is in Section 4, subsection 4. It just adds additional cost items into that item number 2, so that it's not only constructing or acquiring, but also operating and maintaining energy resources, just making sure that that language is comprehensive. The other 2 items we're looking to add into the information that is provided for the individual energy resources and the scenarios overall, information about labor standards, and make sure that those are something that's brought forward as a consideration. I guess the last thing I'll say before I do turn it over is that there's still ongoing conversations. A lot of people have gotten a little bit of what they want. A lot of people have also, a broad range of people have also been told no for some of the things that they've wanted to get in this bill. I don't think those conversations are over yet. They are still ongoing, and you're going to hear some concerns brought forward today, and am continuing to talk with everybody to try and figure out what additional changes can be made. And when it comes to these 2 items, have gotten some additional feedback from folks at the IBEW, and there's already some very strong labor standards in place in some of the existing process. So we're continuing to talk about other tweaks to the language to make sure that high quality jobs continue to be protected as part of the process moving forward. So that concludes my presentation. Glad to answer any questions that the committee may have.
Okay, we'll start with Assemblywoman Peters.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thanks for putting in the work on this. I know that this has been a labor of whatever it is at week end of session. So I really appreciate this work, and you all know, because I've been relatively vocal about it in this committee, that I truly believe that community-based solar is really the answer to our energy problems. And from our perspective, and I don't think I'm alone in this, when we hear from constituents, the 2 things we hear about in the energy world is the fear of the infrastructure breakdown, right? And the incredible increases in the cost of providing energy for our homes. And with that in mind, can you talk about how you see this bill addressing the issue, this cost issue to ratepayers and the 300% or so increases that some of us have seen over the last year?
Thank you very much for that question, Assemblywoman. Howard Watts for the record. I certainly appreciate that, and it's been a tough time for everyone, and really want to. I think the way this bill is envisioned of addressing that, again, is trying to take a really long-range, forward-thinking approach to our planning. And then it's going to be modified over time, but we really want to try and plan ahead to reduce the risks of those things happening. One of the things that I want to make clear, we still get a significant majority of our power generation from natural gas generation, and it's those prices that transferred into our electricity generation that have really pushed bills up so high. And so, again, we've got good clean energy policies. We've continued to see progress in that direction. Although, again, we've seen some additional gas generation brought online to help shore up reliability. And so, again, the general direction of this bill is let's build out more local clean energy resources and dedicated clean energy resources. And I think that is something that long-term is going to help provide stability. We just do not, there's been some supply chain issues related to some of those projects, but overall, the stability that we see, that the fuel for a solar project is consistently free. So once that project cost is established, and the operating and maintenance of it, we have stability there. And so increasing the integration of those resources is going to help deliver lower and more stable rates to customers moving forward. And again, at the same time, if we put too many projects forward, those do have to get recovered. And so we want to figure out what is that balance so that we're not overdoing it in a way that we're putting additional costs down onto ratepayers. And that, again, is why the overall thrust of this bill is strengthening our energy planning process moving forward. And so I think that is ultimately the option. The option that is best for the state is to focus on having an energy planning process that is efficient. We don't want it to be overly cumbersome, but we want it to have full information and allow, again, the experts that deal in that realm making the decisions about what path is best to move forward that achieves our clean energy goals, which, again, I think completely lines up with our affordability goals, but does it in a strategic and balanced way.
I have a comment. And I appreciate this. The cost benefit analysis, right, is often so in the moment, right? How are we responding to this extreme in the moment? And that doesn't create the stability that you're talking about. When we're talking about what affects our constituents, stability and understanding what it is that is going to come in the mail as their bill every month, that's important. How we get there, I don't think matters so much to everybody on the ground, right? Those are the things we deal with in making the sausage in this building. But at the end of the day, that stability is a huge benefit to our constituents. And if we can get to a place, and I think that this bill brings us closer to that, where we're looking forward to how do we increase that stability over time, or at least take smaller steps, while also securing the infrastructure that's needed to get us to the place where our renewable portfolio standards being met, and we're getting to those goals that we've set for ourselves over the last couple of sessions. I think that puts us in a place where we can go back to our constituents and say, hey, we did the work so that your family can have stability. I appreciate the work you put in. Thank you.
Assemblywoman Brown May.
Thank you, Chair. Ooh, I think I just broke it. We'll just pretend that I didn't break it. Hi. I have a couple of questions, if you don't mind, Chair. First, I want to say thank you, Chair Watts, for all of your hard work on this energy policy. As you know, we've really worked very diligently on throughout this entire session, over 100 days in. I want to go back to a little bit about the sausage and the sausage making process that I think maybe we don't always understand the details relative to that. So would you talk through a little bit about how did this specific set of reforms come about? Why is this energy planning process needed now? How did you get where you are today?
Thank you very much for that question, Assemblywoman Brown-May. Howard Watts for the record. That's a great question. And again, I appreciate the recognition that this is not easy. There's a lot of complexity to this. Again, there's an entire regulatory realm where it honestly gets way past my level in terms of the details and the nuance. At the same time, why this came forward again, I think we're seeing and hearing about these dual challenges, which have been, struggles with the overall energy supply during times of peak demand, and then the issues that folks have seen with affordability of their bills. And so we have to do something to take action and chart a clear path forward for us and for our future. As far as how this particular policy came together, it's a great question. So again, there's ongoing consideration of amendments to the 2021 Integrated Resource Plan that was filed by NV Energy, and I think decisions have been made on that as recently as a couple of weeks ago. It might be even more recently. There's always activity going on over there, and so when we looked at addressing the amendment process, again, I think that came from hearing a lot of different comments and concerns about what's appropriate for an amendment, an add-on, and how do we make sure that the plan itself, the original plan, is as robust and forward-thinking and comprehensive as it can possibly be. That's why the name integrated is in it. So that's how that piece came in. Looking at the closing the open position, there's significant debate about that. And again, exactly how far do we go in setting an amount of resources that need to be built that we as a legislature set versus having some regulatory flexibility to figure out what that point is. So that was an area of significant debate. But that was one of the key things, was figuring out overall how do we reduce that market exposure, because again, that hits the two key issues that I've brought up, of making sure that we've got electric service that we can depend on, and that we've got electric service that we can afford. And so this is an attempt to try and, again, set some direction in statute. We have a lot of existing policy that says that those things are important, but we want to make sure that there is a proposal put forward that goes further than other proposals have gone before, so that its costs and benefits can be evaluated along with all the others. And so that's why we're explicitly including this option, but not specifying a particular outcome or picking a specific option, leaving that up to our regulatory process. And then, again, as part of that conversation, it was originally what should be evaluated in deciding kind of yes or no on doing that full build out. In conversation, it was like, actually, we should expand the amount of information that is included in this process overall. And that will give different parties more to interact with and react to, and hopefully lead to better decision making. And so that's how that whole set of information that it needs to be included in scenarios is there. There's currently no statute that says what needs to be included in scenarios other than the points for the low carbon scenario that you see in the existing language before the open position scenario is added. And there are some points in regulation, but this is actually a much more robust set of information that we want to make sure is coming through in the process. And then, again, transparency, that was a recurring theme. How do we make sure that this is a open, transparent, fair process? And that was, we wanted to make sure that we strengthen that stakeholder participation. So that's how that piece entered as well. And, that really is it. It started with a lot of issues and concerns that were brought forward by the utility that were then vetted with, again, with consumer advocates, with a range of different perspectives. And sometimes there were many different ideas of how to reach a particular goal. Ultimately, I felt like this was another step forward. And I do want to say that things have continued to be put out there. Some of them I think were a little bit too big. Some of them I think were a little bit late to try and incorporate. Obviously, we're hearing this bill on, I think, day 114. So trying to figure out how do we get to the place that we want to get and make some forward progress on this. But I think these conversations are going to have to continue. And I think that there's probably additional improvements and streamlining that can be made to our energy planning process for the benefit of everyone. But that's really, at a high level, the process that we went through to get to this point. And again, there are other ideas that were put out there, but these were the ones that I feel there's a significant degree of consensus. In addition to working on energy, I work on water. So 100% consensus is pretty much out of the question. But I feel like this is again a strong step forward for us to take.
Thank you, Chair Watts. Follow-up, Chair. Please.
That answer was not robust
It wasn't
enough?
very robust,
Oh, okay.
but now I have another question.
Go
Thank you.
ahead,
Thank
sure.
you, Chair. I appreciate that. Chair Watts, in your amendment, amend Section 4, Sub 4A2, you delineate the cost of constructing or acquiring, operating, and maintaining the energy resource. And I'm curious to know, do you have a picture of who owns that energy resource? Our colleague talked a little bit about solar on homes and residential neighborhoods, right? Who owns the resource that you are considering as part of this bill?
Thank you for that question, Assemblywoman. Howard Watts for the record. That's quite a question. And I guess ownership was another significant discussion point throughout this process. This legislation, as is presented before you today, is neutral on ownership. And so it does not block any sort of ownership mix, nor does it prescribe one for any of these energy facilities. Again, if you're looking at a contract with a third party, essentially those construction that acquisition cost and the O&M related to that is all rolled up into the price of energy through a power purchase agreement through utility constructed or owned and operated facilities. Then that does have the individual cost of construction as well as O&M expenses. So the goal with this was to be neutral, and again, to not explicitly block or explicitly choose any individual option. I will say, to your point about and to Assemblywoman Peters' point about kind of smaller distributed generation with individual ownership, again, this bill is essentially silent on that. I think when you're talking about, the open position is somewhere between 2,000 and 3,000 megawatts. So to make progress towards that, you're going to need large scale resources. But one of the things that has certainly come up is how do we also do planning in a way that is smart from the perspective of impacts on lands. And I think that is, again, something that isn't explicit. There's no position taken one way or another in this. I do think that's an item that is definitely in need of additional conversation moving forward.
All right, Assemblywoman Summers Armstrong.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Chair Watts, for your presentation. A couple of questions, if the chairwoman will allow.
Definitely, go ahead.
Thank you, ma'am. I'm concerned about reliability. I think I've discussed this with many people over the last couple of years. On December 15th, 2020, I remember this day specifically, in my neighborhood, which has almost all above ground wiring, we were out of power for 15 hours. Just in my neighborhood and some of the surrounding neighborhoods, we were out of power for over 20 hours, right before COVID. This is a real issue in our community in older neighborhoods. And so when we had the last session last time, we had the big omnibus bill. We were told that there were going to be a lot of things happening, but I still haven't seen anything definitive on how we're going to come into already developed older neighborhoods. How is this going to help us to bring reliability into underserved and basically forgotten and disinvested communities?
Thank you very much for that question, Assemblywoman Summers Armstrong. Howard Watts for the record. I really appreciate that question. And I want to start up front by saying that there's nothing specifically in this legislation that does that. And I do want to acknowledge that a lot of this conversation around big picture reliability by building additional resources to make sure that we can meet our energy demands doesn't mean anything if you're in a neighborhood where, due to aging infrastructure, your service is not in general reliable. Or if I think you brought up one example. We've talked a lot about heat and that peak demand, and there are significant issues there. Of course, for my colleagues from the north, this winter, there were people without power for days following the impacts of a severe winter storm. And that has a much greater impact on individuals, perhaps depending on the scenario, than even a rolling blackout of a couple hours. And so I just, first of all, want to acknowledge that that's really important. I think as other folks come up, I think we have the Public Utilities Commission. Perhaps they could speak to that. Perhaps the utility and others can speak to that as well. What I will say is this: by again trying to have a more balanced policy that is, and shifting that focus onto the integrated resource plan, having some of those investments to make sure that we don't have deferred maintenance, that we are upgrading infrastructure across communities, that should be part of that integrated resource plan. And and that is something that is my goal, to make sure that we have a process that allows some of those issues to be raised a little bit more, provides some additional information about how some of those issues are being addressed. And, I would be glad to continue the conversation with you and others coming out of this to make sure that we tighten that up, because I agree, the investments that we make need to benefit every single community, and we need to have reliability for every single community. So again, I think by looking to add some strength to the integrated resource planning process, it makes sure that we're not just looking at some of these other big picture things that have been discussed to this point, but can also address those needed investments to make sure that that reliability is protected across communities.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Follow up, please. One of the things that we have been hearing or heard in one of the other committees that I sit on, revenue, was this concept that we have some solar producers in some of our communities that are getting tax abatements, but that are not providing any of their energy produced with those tax abatements to our community. Is there a way for us to identify what is needed and ensure that whatever is generated here, our basic need is met, or some type of quotient, and then they can sell off the market wherever they choose, but that if we're giving tax abatements, that we're at least getting some return for our communities before it gets sold outside the state lines.
Thank you for that question, Assemblywoman Summers Armstrong. Howard Watts for the record. I really appreciate that question, and I really appreciate that that conversation was brought forward this session. Unfortunately, I think that piece of legislation did not move forward. I would very much like to continue that conversation. This bill does not touch on that specific issue. However, to your point of focusing on the development of energy resources that benefit the state, that is what is envisioned through this process. So under this integrated resource plan, this does not envision any resources that are being developed for the benefit of other customers outside of the state. That doesn't mean that those projects are in any way being restricted. It's essentially kind of another set of activity that's going on. But I think the way that this addresses that is by trying to, again, encourage that to the greatest extent that it makes sense for the customers in our state, that we are prioritizing the development of resources in our state for the benefit of the customers within our state.
Assemblyman Carter.
Thank you. Yeah, I've got two questions and I'll roll them together so you can answer them both. How do you see this bill expediting build out of generation assets to both reduce the necessity like we had last year of paying exorbitant rates on the open market? We need to expedite that and get that closed, but also to capture Inflation Reduction Act dollars that we know are not going to be around forever. So that's the first part. And then second, in testimony in front of the Assembly Growth and Infrastructure Committee earlier this session, we heard a large unregulated electric utility describe exactly how they can take and push a button in their home office and provide peak power into the grid at the request of the utility. Why I didn't see anything in this bill trying to maybe bring, I'm talking about Sunrun, under regulation so they can, because they're taking advantage right now of incentives that were meant for direct homeowners, but are actually going to an unregulated electric utility that's got distributed assets.
Thank you for that question, Assemblyman Carter. Howard Watts for the record. I appreciate those questions. I think I'll take them in reverse order. So first, to your point, I'm glad to have additional conversations about that. From my perspective, those things could be really helpful as demand response technologies. And one of the things that, and distributed generation technologies, and one of the tension points, I think, is that what is the coordination mechanism? That's one of the big tensions overall, I think, with distributed generation resources is that if they are they're commissioned, they're built outside of kind of the utility planning process, and then they're operated and maintained outside of that. So they pop up, they might come down. There might be maintenance issues that need to be addressed. And then I think to your point about some larger and more sophisticated options, how do you have some sort of integration and collaboration? One, to make sure that the benefits get to the consumers, and two, to help meet the energy resource needs of our state. So I think those are important conversations. We've seen, for example, with the growth in other smart technology like thermostats and other things, the ability to generate some of these partnerships with different technology providers where there's a collaboration to address some of those demand issues and some of those energy supply issues. And so that's certainly the direction that I'm hoping to have some of that stuff move going forward. As you know, there is another policy that's related to rooftop solar development, and I'm glad to continue discussions on that. This policy, again, primarily looks to the larger utility scale side, and that mix of generation assets, storage, demand reduction, and so on to address our needs. So this kind of looks at it from that perspective. And then can you repeat your first question? I appreciate you trying to double them up, but it's quite a bit.
Thank you. No, it was about how do we take it, does this envision expediting the process so we can start reducing our reliance on these astronomical prices during peak times, and also potentially capture the federal dollars that we know aren't going to be there forever?
Thank you for that question. Howard Watts for the record. That's certainly the goal, and again, trying to do that in a way that also doesn't overextend or overcommit us. One of the issues that we've also had, again, is just supply chain issues. There have been some projects that haven't come together because of various supply chain issues, either unavailability of certain components or exorbitant price increases that made kind of the original terms untenable to be able to deliver the project. Those things are kind of out of our control. By having the utility submit a scenario to close its open position, I mean, they would be putting forward a bold plan to significantly accelerate their build out over this kind of planning horizon in order to both harness that funding and accelerate our progress towards those goals. Again, one of the tension points in this discussion is how far do we go as a legislature in setting that direction and saying that that's something that we should definitely look to do, but also making sure that we do not pick a landing point that might be off the mark in some way. And so, to me, the combination of legislative declaration, reinforcing the importance of addressing reliability and affordability, and the potential issue, the issues that come with significant exposure to the open market, then directing the utility to put forward a plan to completely close exposure to the open market. I think that having that in the mix for consideration, and having the utility, who I think will talk about what they envision as what they see as the potential financial benefits of doing so to ratepayers in the state. Hopefully, once that is brought before the commission and that cost benefit analysis is there, I think everyone recognizes that we need to do more. So again, the question is exactly where do we land? And so this bill proposes figuring out that exact landing point being determined by the commission. But I do feel that this will help give clear guidance to everyone to move in that direction and to do so as soon as possible. So the next IRP will be filed in 2024. And the goal is that, and everyone's shared goal is that IRP will help put us in a position to move towards these goals.
All right, Assemblyman Watts, we've got 3 more members who have questions. I'm going to challenge you to answer them in 30 seconds or less. Are you game?
Challenge accepted.
All right, Senator Pizzina.
Thank you so much, Chair, and thank you so much, Chair Watts. This was a really interesting presentation. I appreciate how much work must have gone into this. I was curious during the discussions with stakeholders if the challenges they had in Texas with their energy infrastructure went into any of the discussions here, and then also what you mentioned earlier regarding the loss of power for so many days in northern Nevada. I guess really what I'm trying to get at is, was there a discussion specifically in regards to what tools may be used both in the South when it comes to having that stability with the heat waves we have, and then also having the stability up north when it's the wintertime and we have freezing temperatures, especially like we did this year?
Thank you for that question, Howard Watts for the record. So some of those are really infrastructure challenges in hardening, reinforcing, and protecting our core infrastructure. And that honestly wasn't as much at the forefront of this discussion, but it is important, and I think it should be part of the planning process. A lot of the focus on addressing those issues through this are, again, a mix of making sure that we have enough access to dedicated electric resources, including energy storage as well as looking at ways that we can try and reduce demand to avoid some of those peak crunch periods where some of those issues pop up.
Close. Senator Hansen. Senator Pizzina, a follow-up question? You good? Okay.
Thank you, Madam
Yeah,
Chair.
Senator
No,
Hansen, all
I don't
you.
mind the longer ones. I've kind of enjoyed the discussion. I think one area where we would disagree, and that is there is a 100% consensus on the concept that our constituents want to see lower energy costs. Energy costs have been going through the roof, as Assemblywoman Peters pointed out, for the last several years. One of the reasons for that is that natural gas production has dropped substantially, which made the price go up. We quit fracking. The one issue you didn't address, though, was the constitutional requirement in the years 22 and 23, not less than 26% of the total energy that the utility companies have to provide is now to come from green energy sources. And then it has to go up to 34% in the next 2 years. I think there's a direct correlation between those requirements and the constant escalation in the cost of the energy they're providing. Do you see any correlation at all between those?
Thank you for that question, Senator Hansen. Howard Watts for the record. I personally do not. I think it would be worth asking some of the others that are going to come up for their perspectives on that. Again, my opinion is that our exposure to natural gas, again, given the various issues that you just raised, and that spike in prices has been what has really hammered ratepayers. And in fact, clean energy resources are the cheapest that we have. That's why there's the pursuit of deals for dedicated clean energy resources, because it is actually cheaper than our blended energy mix as a whole. And so I think moving towards those goals, which we are not only currently on track to not just meet, but also exceed, is not an issue in that regard.
Good. I look forward to asking the utility companies those questions, because my understanding is the spike is at least partially related to this constant effort to try to go green. When green production, as Senator Summers Armstrong just pointed out, they're selling that stuff currently out of this market because it's too expensive in our own markets. Solar energy costs are substantially higher than natural gas production of energy. So with that, last issue, all of the issues you brought up in this. Now, any common sense person, I can't believe Warren Buffett, who is the owner of NV Energy, would not have addressed every single one of the points you're talking about. You really believe that we as legislators are going to come up with some energy planning process that these guys have overlooked? You're the one that said right in your thing, we're not experts, and that the regulatory process is way over our head, and I agree completely. But it's not over the head of the people that have actually been producing energy for decades in the state of Nevada. I'm just kind of wondering what in this bill that we are going to, in effect, force on them that they aren't doing already based on normal market demand, supply and demand.
Thank you for that question, Senator. Howard Watts for the record. I think the goal of this bill is to make sure that all of that stuff is done in a way that maximizes the benefit to energy customers in this state, whether it's the individual family to the largest company in the state. We have to balance, as you mentioned, it's a large corporate monopoly utility. This is looking to strengthen the regulation on some of those decisions so that we put customers first.
Very good. One quick follow-up. I'll make it quick.
Okay,
You
go
know,
ahead.
2016 and 2018, we had a ballot question on that very issue, where we had the big consumers of energy basically trying to get away from a monopoly situation, and the citizens of the state of Nevada in 2018 reversed their 2016 vote by 2-1 and insisted that we stay with a monopoly-type system. Is it your view that if we had broken out of that monopoly and opened up to a more free market-type energy situation, that would make costs come down for citizens of Nevada and the bigger rate payers?
Howard Watts for the record. No, but it is my opinion that having a strong planning process overseen by a strong regulator is critical to make sure that, again, at the end of the day, we're delivering the best service and the most benefit to the customers in this state, and that's what this bill is hoping to improve.
Very good. Thank you for the second bite. I hope we do get to ask questions of some of the utility people when they come up as well. Thanks, Madam Chair.
Everybody will,
Excellent. Thanks, Chair.
except you.
Then I'll sneak mine to some of my colleagues on this chair. No, I'm sure you're joking. Thank
I
you.
am. Assemblywoman Kasama, you can close us out.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you. You can tell there's been a lot of work going on with this. And, you know, it is a balance. I think we hear from our neighbors and you know, cities, communities, and our nations, you know, about energy self-reliance. It is a great concern. And I think it does start even in our homes and our communities where we are concerned, as our colleague said, with local communities where they're not getting the energy. And, you know, to promote a balance of developing, you know, the green and other sources and making sure it's cost effective for everybody is that delicate balance. And I think we all want that and want to work on that. And so the kind of an overview question I have on the bill, that in the details of the bill here, I just wanted to confirm that, so what I'm seeing, and please correct me, is that currently when the energy goes for a rate application, they're just showing what their costs are at now. Is that correct? So they're showing this is the cost of on the expenses, this is why we need to increase it. And so it's basically based on historical cost to them for a rate application. And so I just want to confirm if that is correct, one. And then number two, the overview of this bill now would add to that with a planning process in great detail that has scenarios, one for green energy, one for maybe the best cost-effective energy, and then adding a public forum. Is that a correct oversight? I just want to confirm.
Thank you very much for that question, Assemblywoman Kasama. Howard Watts for the record. So there's two existing processes, and I think the simplest way to think about it is there's the resource planning process where we ask the utility to project what do we need to provide, what are the different options to meet those needs, and what delivers it in the most cost-effective and beneficial way while also meeting some of our other goals like movement towards our clean energy targets. Anything that's approved, ultimately that plan has to be approved, and that is the plan that the utility works to carry out. Once that plan is approved, all those costs are deemed prudent, and then they are recovered at some point through rates, and that happens through the rate case. So while there's references to both in here, that is kind of the difference. So they both already exist. Most of the provisions of this bill are trying to strengthen the resource planning end, which again is important because anything that's approved through that essentially has to at some point be recovered through rates.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
All right. Assemblyman Watts, if it's okay with you, we'll go ahead and open it up for testimony. If you're here to testify, do me a favor, take out your comments, cut it in half, bring the short version to the table. Do not forget that the committee will be accepting full written comments. We're at about an hour and 10 minutes or so, and we're just starting testimony. So please keep that in mind as you come up to the table to speak. So if you're here to testify in support of AB 524, go ahead and fill the seats. Ladies first.
Thank you, Chair Harris. Laura Grenier on behalf of the Nevada Resort Association. Good afternoon, Chair and members of the committee. I would like to thank Chair Watts for his work on AB 524, which was a very transparent, inclusive, and substantive process. If you want to give customers relief from the skyrocketing energy rates, he has hit the nail on the head. The way to do it is to improve the integrated resource planning process, because if you don't improve that process and allow the Public Utilities Commission to have a transparent, full, thorough vetting of the utility proposals, then you will only worsen the problem, because you don't have the information before you to vet utility proposals. You don't have the information before you as to how much it will cost for the utility to close the open position. You will have no idea what kind of rate impact that will have if you were to accept the invitation to create some directive to the utility or to the commission to close that open position. So please, be cautious if proposals like that are made. This bill proposes a significant improvement to the integrated resource planning process, and it will provide customers relief because, as Chair Watts said, once a determination is made in that planning process that a project can go forward, customers are locked in to pay for that project. So we've got to fix that process. What's wrong with it is the utility has brought serial amendments. The fourth amendment that was just recently heard was for $1 billion. $1 billion. That is something I would submit should be done in a full IRP. And with this bill, it would be. Notably, too, if the utility says, we've got to hurry up and get this proposal forward to the Public Utilities Commission so we can bring down rates and close the open position, they can do that as soon as they want under this bill because it eliminates the 3-year limitation to bringing a full integrated resource plan. So if time is of the essence, it is in their court under this bill to put all of the information before the commission so it can be fully and properly vetted. Energy issues are increasingly complex and require a transparent dialogue with regulatory oversight to avoid unintended consequences like rate shock to customers. These issues must not be decided with legislative mandates or with short circuits of the Public Utilities Commission process. The legislature should not give a directive to the commission to prefer any plan put forward by the utility or to accept any plan put forward by the utility. Any legislative directive that is proposed that circumvents that process or directs the commission to prefer an alternative could have devastating rate impacts on customers. So you're asking very good questions, and if you want to fix that problem, you should avoid giving any kind of mandate or directive for any kind of utility proposal or project. It should be fully vetted by the commission. And it begs the question, if a proposal like that is put forward to you, why the utility would not just put all of that evidence before the commission for a thorough vetting where the rate impacts can be fully analyzed. If you're told today or before you vote on this bill that there's modeling and financial predictions that because of tax incentives, this will actually drive rates down if the utility builds all of this. If that, you don't have the data before you to evaluate that. What if the inputs are wrong? What if the assumptions are wrong? If you mandate a directive like that without any kind of data and any kind of vetting of that information, it is a huge risk to customers, and you're putting tremendous risk of upward pressure on rates for customers. That belongs in front of the Public Utilities Commission. This bill directs that the utility propose a scenario to look at
Ms.
exactly
Grenier,
that.
you're at about 4 minutes.
Okay. I will wrap up quickly. Thank you, Chair. I believe this bill strikes the appropriate balance, and any suggestion it doesn't go far enough it should be looked at very carefully because you don't have the evidence before you. Just one more quick point, and that is this is a particularly important time to be talking about a thorough process because there is already $2.5 billion of spending for the green links that isn't going to be in process. Okay, that spending is not in rates yet, but it is coming. And according to NV Energy, that is nearly 4 times their average annual capital spend. So that is already going to come into rates soon. Rather than create any further legislative directives for in-state generation, please consider carefully just strengthening the resource planning process as Chair Watts has proposed. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair and members of the committee. My name is Virginia Valentine, and I'm with the Nevada Resort Association. I want to echo the statements made by Ms. Grenier, and I also want to thank Chair Watts for his willingness to work with a broad range of stakeholders to discuss and vet this policy proposal. This bill is the product of many meetings over several weeks with various and diverse group of stakeholders, including the utility. This bill will ensure a transparent process at the PUC that will fully vet reliable and cost impacts to customers. The bill will ensure that there are in-state resources to support supply and reliability for Nevada's future, and a process that is transparent and fair to customers. The bill's primary purpose is to effect a fair and balanced process, fair for the utility, fair to ratepayers, and a process that will address reliability, supply, and rate impacts. It allows regulators with the expertise, experience, and information to effectively evaluate all scenarios available to meet the future needs of Nevadans. It determines the best way to establish those needs, and we support the bill because it provides a thorough, fair, and transparent process. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Harris, members of the committee. My name is Lucas Folletta. I represent a group called the Southern Nevada Gaming Group. We participate, it's a group of gaming companies that participate in Public Utilities Commission proceedings regularly. We also support the bill and are very appreciative of Assemblyman Watts' efforts here. There's been discussion about striking a balance, and I think that is the appropriate framework and way to think about what the bill does. As Ms. Grenier mentioned, this is an important time to be thinking about this because we are clearly in an environment of rising rates. And I think it's important to note that it's an atypical environment. Electricity rates are not always rising. And in a lot of cases when electricity rates rise, they are very minor and most people don't feel them. But that is not what we've been experiencing lately, as many of you have already pointed out. And because of the way that electric rates are made, there's always a lag between when the utility makes capital investments and when we feel those things in rates. And so as Mrs. Grenier pointed out, there is a $2.5 billion expenditure that's going to be coming down the pike, but there's also a number of other unusual expenses that are already being undertaken. For example, the Public Utilities Commission recently approved a $366 million peaking plant in Southern Nevada to address reliability concerns that the utility brought to it on an expedited basis. In addition, the utility recently, in the last few months, has filed a 3-year natural disaster protection plan, pursuant to which it plans to spend, or proposes to spend rather, $475 million guarding against natural disasters. The Commission has also approved in the last year and a half $170 million in electric vehicle transportation electrification upgrades. I could continue to go on. It is an expensive system to run, no doubt, but these, again, are unusual expenses, and people will feel these. The Bureau of Consumer Protection recently estimated that electric bills by July in Southern Nevada, the average electric bill will be $470. As these expenses come down the pike, that will increase. It doesn't mean all these expenses are wrong or we shouldn't do these things, but it means that we need to preserve the regulatory process as it relates to what we build, how we build, and when we build it. And so Ms. Grenier's point about a directive or any approach that sort of takes the decision away from the Public Utilities Commission about to close an open position or not, I agree would be a mistake. I want to point out just that the integrated resource plan process is not something most of us interface with. A very small number of people do. But as you've heard from other people, one of the hallmarks of that process is that it's multidisciplinary. It involves the expertise of economists, regulators, lawyers, accountants, people who do utility regulation for a living. It also involves statutory and regulatory requirements that require the production of substantial amounts of data. For example, load forecasts that predict over time how many people are going to need electricity and how much. It predicts what resources will be coming online in the future, and it also estimates the rate impacts when the cases are done properly. The process is overseen by public utilities commissioners and a public utilities commission that is built for the purpose of making those decisions. And it really is the commission that is obligated to make that decision. It's not a utility decision, it's the regulator. And that's a function of a regulatory compact that says utility doesn't have to deal with competition, but they do have to be regulated because there are problems with
Mr. Folletta, you are at 3 minutes and 15 seconds.
I'll finish with this.
Thank you.
Last problem that the IRP process addresses is something called capital bias. Public utilities get a return on capital investment. They're authorized by that under law, Supreme Court law. And so everything they build comes with a cost. Part of what the integrated resource plan does is decides whether and to what extent the utility should own capital assets and invest in them because there is that added expense. So it's just one more reason, given the rising rates, why we should be very careful about what we do here. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Thank you. Michael Hillerby on behalf of Google. Google supports Nevada's ambitions to create a clean electricity system and support economic development. This legislation advances the process on long-term planning for electricity by making it easier for customers and other stakeholders to weigh in on plans that NV Energy brings forward and gives the PUC the appropriate oversight over their approval. A strong integrated resource planning process is critical to advance the state toward a cost-effective zero-carbon electricity system with customers, both large and small, at the center. Google is happy to support this bill and would like to thank the Chair Watts for his work and for bringing so many parties together to work on this bill. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Harris, members of the committee. For the record, my name is Christy Cabrera-Georgeson, and I'm the Deputy Director of the Nevada Conservation League. We're here in support of AB 524. Nevadans want clean, affordable energy and deserve a better resource planning process that protects customers. Earlier this year, NV Energy requested and the PUC approved a new gas peaker plant in Southern Nevada, despite Nevadans being hit hard with high utility bills due to volatile gas prices. This new fossil fuel infrastructure was approved largely due to a broken and outdated IRP process. AB 524 will increase transparency in this process, provide for more stakeholder and public participation, and close loopholes that enabled NV Energy to push through this new gas plant on a rush timeline. Additionally, it will strengthen the IRP process to emphasize commitments to clean energy while ensuring reliability and affordability for customers. This bill is an important step forward in energy planning, and we urge the committee's support. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Harris, members of the Joint Committee. For the record, my name is Andrew Diss. I'm the Senior Vice President and Chief Strategy Officer for Morello Gaming. We operate the Sahara in Las Vegas and the Grand Sierra Resort in Reno. I want to thank Chairman Watts for bringing this bill forward. As he said, this has been a painstaking endeavor that has involved multiple interest groups over the course of session. I think we've come to a good place with this bill that's before you today. Reliability and keeping rates under control for all of our team members is of the utmost importance to us. Our two properties are a little different. So at Sahara, we use an outside energy provider. We went through the 704B process several years ago, and at the Grand Sierra, we are a large commercial customer for the utility. All of our reliability issues that we've experienced as a company, we've seen related to the Grand Sierra, and that's where the service is provided by NV Energy. We're able to be greener for cheaper and enjoy more reliability with our outside provider at Sahara. But the biggest example of which was touched on earlier with the significant weather event we had in January. Over the New Year's weekend, we had 71,000 Northern Nevadas who were utility customers that went without power. And this wasn't just for a few hours. This was for several days, almost up to a week for several customers, including a lot of our team members. Some of those team members have family members that rely on medical equipment that requires power to their houses, and they had to come up with accommodations and find different housing on a whim because their power was out for so long. So because of those concerns when it comes to reliability with the monopoly utility we have in this state, we are in favor of this bill and we ask for your support. Thank you.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, Sasha Sutcliffe-Stevenson here today for MGM Resorts in support of this bill. I have nothing new to add, so I will just leave it with a thank you to the chair or the sponsor of this bill for being so inclusive during the process. Thank you.
Hello, Chair and members of the committee. My name is Jamarion Williams, and I am the Government Affairs Manager for Western Resource Advocates. Western Resource Advocates fully supports AB 524. This bill is a great first step towards reforming the electric resource planning process in Nevada. This measure ensures that stakeholders have a greater opportunity to understand the utility's plans before resource decisions are made, and that ratepayers are only paying for the most cost-effective and reliable resources that advance Nevada's greenhouse gas emission reduction goals. With that, I would like to thank Assemblyman Watts for bringing forth this bill. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee, and special thank you to Chairman Watts for bringing forward this measure. For the record, Tess Opferman, I'm here today on behalf of I-80 Gold Corporation. I-80 is a 2-year-old mining company that today is focused on acquiring retired mine sites and putting them back into production. It is rare for mining companies to get involved in this policy area, as the largest operators rely on their own power generation for their operations. But a company the size of I-80 Gold, particularly a young one, does not have access to resources to do that. Mining and milling are incredibly energy-intensive processes, and mines are the largest consumer of energy outside of Clark County, which leaves mining companies like I-80 particularly sensitive to rate increases. It also leaves them vulnerable to shortages in the overall supply of energy in the state. We understand that energy policy requires a delicate balance between ratepayers' various needs, and it puts the legislature in a difficult position. We believe AB 524 finds a balance and gives clear direction to the PUC without tying their hands or forcing additional costs onto consumers. For this reason, we're in full support of this bill, and thank you for the hearing today.
Good afternoon, Chair Harris, members of the Joint Committee. For the record, Erin Midby, Vice President of Government Affairs for Boyd Gaming Corporation. I wanted to echo all of the thanks to Chair Watts for his leadership and work on this bill. It's really allowed for robust and substantive policy discussions and deliberations on important energy policy, which I think is critically important in these times. Boyd Gaming is in support of AB 524, as we believe it is a good compromise which affords NV Energy the ability to address issues or concerns related to reliability and the volatility of the open energy markets, while at the same time ensuring the PUC has the authority to fully vet proposed projects and the impact on ratepayers to protect consumers. And as Chair Watts said, this protects and benefits all ratepayers. You know, while Boyd Gaming might be a large ratepayer, at the end of it, as we said, it's of the utmost importance to keep it affordable and reliable for our team members and customers alike. So thank you and urge your support on this bill.
Good afternoon, Chair Harris, members of the joint committees. For the record, I'm Michael Alonso. I'm here on behalf of Caesars Entertainment, Inc. Caesars is in support of AB 524. We want to thank Assemblyman Watts for bringing the bill and for having an open process that took into consideration input from all the stakeholders, and we thank the stakeholders for their participation. Caesars believes that a reliable and reasonably priced power supply is critical to the state, and it's incredibly critical to our industry and our employees. For all the reasons previously stated by the Resort Association representatives, we support the bill, which we believe reflects a good balance of stakeholder input and provides a pathway for reliable, cost-effective electric service that aligns with the state's integrated resource planning process. And we also believe that AB 524 will create jobs. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair and members of the committee. For the record, Jessica Ferrato here today on behalf of Switch. We want to thank Assemblyman Watts for his transparency through the process and inclusiveness of stakeholders in crafting this bill. We appreciate that the bill provides for evaluation through the IRP process within the PUC. We look forward to working with the utility at the PUC in a continued transparent process on future projects. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you, Chair Harris, members of the committees. My name is Tom Clark. I'm here on behalf of the Reno Sparks Chamber of Commerce. A lot has been said. We agree with all of it, so ditto.
Thank you, Chair Harris. Excuse me, members of the committee. Richard Perkins for the record on behalf of NextEra Energy Resources, on behalf in support of Assembly Bill 524, and like Mr. Clark said, ditto.
Okay, we got better towards the end there. Looks like we have someone in Las Vegas to testify in support. Is that correct? Give us a head nod. Okay, go ahead and start when you're ready, sir.
Members of the committees, my name is Nick Christensen, a volunteer member of the Sierra Club's Legislative Committee. On behalf of the club and our members in support of statewide, I'm speaking in support of AB 524. We appreciate Assemblyman Watts' efforts to provide a framework to modernize Nevada's regulatory regime. Consequently, we're happy to support this bill as it stands. However, we view this as just the next step on a very long list of critical changes that need to be made in order to adapt our utility regulation apparatus to meet their future needs. Now, this is the part where I would go in and explain how we should do that, but in deference to Chair Harris's request, I will instead merely hope that you will read the exhibit that's been attached to this bill in Nellis, and I will say thank you for your time.
Thank you so much. Can't really see the full room, but I don't think there's anyone else there to testify in support. So we'll go ahead and go to the phone lines. BPS, can you please check the phones to see if there's anyone who would like to testify in support of AB 524?
To testify in support of AB 524, please press *9 now to take your place in the queue.
Well, good afternoon. My name is Dr. Mary House, spelled MaryHouse, and I am the president and CEO of CHR Inc., which stands for Caring, Helping, and Restoring Lives, and also the First Lady of Mountaintop Faith Ministries. I want to say good afternoon to the chair and members of the committee, and I want to say the CHR is in full support of AB 524. Many of the people CHR represents and advocates for are low-income or fixed-income people. They are often renters and have a higher energy burden than wealthier customers. They also live in communities and areas of town where power outages occur more frequently, which Assemblywoman Chandra was talking about. And this is not due to the utility's ability to provide enough energy, but because the infrastructure is old and in desperate need of upgrades. We need reliable energy all year long. I'm sure you've heard from our colleagues that represent this area that this is a problem that disproportionately impacts low income and communities of color. Our organization has worked to promote utility programs that help customers lower their bills, but that's just not enough. The utility needs to do more to upgrade infrastructure in these communities and offer better programs to reduce energy demand through energy efficiency measures, weatherization, and more. We believe the improvements to the planning process in this bill will help make sure all communities get the investments they deserve to keep their electricity service affordable and reliable. And I want to say thanks to Assemblyman Watts for bringing this bill forward. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Chairman Harris and members of the committee. My name is Barry Lieberman, Lieberman, and I represent the South Point Hotel and Casino. I want to thank Chairman Watts for having such a transparent process where all interested parties had input and ended up crafting a bill that was a compromise, but is a fair one to everybody. Ms. Grenier, who testified on behalf of the Nevada Resort Association, set forth the issues in her testimony. What we need is transparency. We can't allow a rush for mandatory expensive projects that benefit Nevada Energy by increasing their profits because they get a return of income on the amounts they spend at the expense of customers and individual ratepayers who have to deal with the large increases that have recently occurred and that, as Ms. Grenier pointed out, are coming in the near future because of the Green Links project. The PUC is the place for a transparent and thorough process to see what expenses are appropriate, what kind of capacity is needed, and what is fair for both Nevada Energy and the ratepayers. We think this bill is a great bill, and we appreciate Assemblyman Watts bringing it forward. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Pastor Marlon Anderson. That's MarlonAnderson, and I am the Clean Energy Community Organizer for Faith Organizing Alliance. We appreciate Assembly Watts' leadership on AB 524, and we echo the comments that have come before us. Utility customers are already experiencing outrageously high energy bills, and summer is just starting. I'm sure some of you heard from your constituents about how hard it is to make ends meet because their bills are unpredictable and unaffordable. This is because our over-reliance on gas, which is volatile and has to be imported from out of state. We need the utility to do better planning to diversify Nevada's energy mix while keeping their customers top of mind. We deserve clean, affordable energy and a resource planning process that protects us. We are pleased to see that this bill strengthens that process and closes loopholes that allow the utility to fast-track a brand new gas peaker plant earlier this spring. We must be forward-thinking and take action to reduce the risk of skyrocketing electric bills and rate shock moving forward. AB 524 helps make the planning and vetting of energy projects at the PUCN more robust and transparent. And this is why we support this legislation. Thank you. God bless.
Hello, Madam Chair, members of the committee. My name is Angie Dykema, and I'm calling in for the Southwest Energy Efficiency Project. We'd like to thank Chair Watts for bringing this bill forward and believe that this is an important step to provide greater transparency around utility integrated resource planning and also to ensure affordability and reliability of our energy system. SWEEP especially encourages the inclusion in the plan of an evaluation on the impact of the utility's ability to advance cost-effective demand-side management. Energy efficiency is currently too often an overlooked resource which can greatly contribute to resilience and reliability and especially affordability. Energy efficiency programs have the potential to be some of the most impactful, proven mechanisms to save consumers and businesses money on their utility bills, reduce greenhouse gas emissions from homes and buildings, and improve air quality. It's important that NV Energy improves upon their currently existing programs through a robust and transparent planning process at the PUC. SWEEP also supports the requirement for the consumer session to review the plan and provide opportunities for an open process where the public can learn about the plan in adequate detail. We encourage the committee to expeditiously pass this important legislation. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Chair and members of the committee. I'm Melody Wilcox. I represent Mormon Women for Ethical Government. As energy consumers, engaged citizens, and women of conscience, we are concerned about the variety of environmental issues and the health and economic impacts these issues have on individuals and families in our state. For these reasons, we support AB 184, the Nevada Clean Truck Incentive Program, as a means to reduce air pollution. We are concerned about the air pollution created by emissions from our transportation sector, which causes significant health problems. Nevada cities rank among some of the worst in the nation for pollutants, but all Nevada communities located along highways, busy roads, and commercial corridors are at risk. Medium and heavy-duty vehicles are responsible for at least 25% of the air pollution, even though they only comprise 5% of the vehicles on the road. Transitioning them to electric vehicles will substantially reduce carbon pollution, improving air quality, and reducing the rates of heart and lung disease caused by air pollutants. Many large shipping companies are already eager to electrify their fleets. Creating an incentive program here in Nevada will ensure that our small business owners, school districts, and commercial fleets in underserved areas are able to use the funding available through the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law and the Inflation Reduction Act to benefit from transitioning to electric vehicles as well. We thank Assemblyman Howard Watts and the bill's co-sponsors for their bipartisan leadership in bringing this bill forward, and we strongly urge this committee to support and advance this bill as well. Thank you.
Chair, there are no other callers choosing to testify in support at this time.
All right, thank you so much. I see another person in Las Vegas. Did I move off of support too quickly? Do you want to testify in support? No? Okay. Then we will come here to Carson City for those who'd like to testify in opposition to Assembly Bill 524.
Good afternoon, Chair Harris. My name is Hunter Stern. I'm with IBW Local 1245, and I'm also testifying on behalf of IBW Local 396. Our members work for NV Energy, Sierra Pacific up here in the north, and Nevada Power doing business NV Energy in the south. We have concerns with the bill. Actually, we have serious concerns with the bill. Our position is oppose unless amended. We do want to thank, and I want to echo my thanks personally to Chair Watts. We've been meeting with him. I agree with previous speakers that there's been a lot of engagement. I disagree with the level of ability to engage as the bill dropped as a written piece of legislation just last Friday. We have proposed amendments to without going into a whole bunch of detail, and we will continue to talk to the Chair Watts about them. But they have to do with clear direction to fill this open position, which is absolutely necessary to help with price as well as supply. And it's the supply that we're most concerned about. It also talks about utility-owned resources, to ensure that we get the supply that we need, that we get the projects that have been promised and approved by the PUC already actually built, because some of those developers are raising concerns, as Chair Watts mentioned in his testimony, may walk away from those projects. And we need those megawatts, particularly clean energy megawatts, on the grid here in Nevada, and that's our work. And I do want to add, our members get hell when, for whatever reason, people are out of power. We're the guys out in the field. Our members are answering the questions when customers call. We want that infrastructure as sound and reliable as possible. For one, it's work. For another, it's also smooth sailing for our members. So this is a little bit different and outside the scope of the bill, but is equally important to us. And I do appreciate the different ones of you who have brought that up. In terms of the Second Amendment, we have suggested that we increase the RPS, which would actually increase the rate at which clean energy projects could be built and would help supply the state. And all of these are in-state resources. I think this is the most important element. When you build and utilize the power here, you don't have to worry about constraint and congestion, what Chair Watts termed firm transmission. It's here in the balancing authority, it's being delivered, and customers can use it. That is the most reliable way. It's the most certain way to establish what we need.
You're at 3 minutes.
Okay, thank you. In that case, I will finish up. The urgency around this open position and the fact that there is not enough supply on our grid within Nevada and the Western grid is the fundamental problem. And that still is yet solved by this bill. As much as everybody talked about how much the process worked and how it's going to help, if we don't have electricity when we need it, that's going to cause a lot more pain and suffering economically and health. And that's the issues that we're concerned about. And we want to make sure we can keep everybody in power 24 hours a day, whether it's December the 15th, August the 15th, or any other day of the year. Thank you so much.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of the committees. My name is Ronnie Young. I represent the IBW Local 357 in Southern Nevada. Nevadans benefit from construction and in-state renewable energy projects because they perform the work and the investment directly benefits the Nevada economy. If passed as is, we believe that AB 524 will not accelerate the increase of Nevada's renewable energy supply, which we have, and we have already seen examples of developers walking away due to these issues. We really do appreciate the sponsor whom continues to meet with us and about our concerns, but unfortunately we stand opposed as written. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Chair Harris and members of the committee. My name is Paul Catha, and I represent the Culinary Workers Union Local 226. We oppose the bill for the reasons outlined by my colleagues at the IBEW. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the Joint Committee. My name is Ryan McIntosh. I'm representing the State of Nevada Fire Chiefs Association. In consideration of your time, I'll try to keep this brief. As a State Fire Chiefs Association, we have several concerns with AB 524. The most prevalent, while the proposed planning process looks primarily at rates, supply is an issue. The significant for potential of rolling blackouts remains and creates a major public safety concern. Extreme heat already creates elevated risk of wildfires and medical exposure, and these threats will be substantially increased if accompanied by a blackout. Electricity is vital for our emergency response communications and for our constituents whose health is reliant on critical medical equipment and support powered by electricity. Loss of power will disrupt our essential communication functions and enable and protect us first responders during emergencies as we serve and protect our communities we all serve. but also leave some of our most vulnerable populations without the use of electrical-powered oxygen delivery and respiratory assistance devices, amongst others, in turn creates additional emergency response demands upon our responders at times of elevated risk and demand. A study recently published in the Journal of Environmental Science and Technology was also picked up by the New York Times, shows that nearly 800,000 residents in Phoenix would need emergency medical attention if the power went out during a heat wave. It is likely that Las Vegas or even Washoe County in an adjusted scale would be in similar position. Relying on market power acquisition to meet peak summer demands is dangerous for all Nevadans, especially for first responders and fire and EMS, and those the most critical we serve. Nevada Fire Chiefs Association is in opposition to AB 524. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Madam Chair. For the record, Danny Thompson, representing the Operating Engineers Local 12. Filling that open position is critical for all the reasons you've heard. We don't support the bill as written. We do support the amendment that Mr. Stern spoke about, increasing the RFP, and we look forward to working with the parties to resolve this issue. Thank you.
Thank you, chairs and members of the committee. For the record, my name is Susie Martinez, and I am the Executive Secretary Treasurer of the Nevada State AFL-CIO, and we are in opposition of the bill. And I would just like to echo the sentiments of the previous speakers. Thank you.
For the record, my name is Mark Ellis. I'm the President of Communication Workers of America, Local 9413. First of all, I hope you all caught the two obvious puns here, that this is an electrical bill, and Assemblyman Watts brought it. And the second one, somebody testified in the fact that they get shocked when they look at their prices. So I hope you all caught that. I could go into this long dissertation on how my members also climb the same telephone poles or power poles as IBW, but instead I'll just leave it at I stand in full support. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Rob Benner with the Northern Nevada Building Trades. We are concerned that the passage of this bill would mean the outsourcing of energy production and energy jobs outside of Nevada, outsourcing of energy production and energy jobs outside Nevada to states with lower labor standards and lower environmental standards. Instead, we should focus on improving and increasing in-state energy production to make sure Nevada's dollars stay in Nevada, while also improving our region's good-paying jobs and environmental outcomes. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Sarah Collins. For the record, I represent the National Electrical Contractors Association of Northern Nevada, and contractors, employers, and other Nevadans benefit from construction of in-state renewable energy products because they perform the work and the investment directly benefits the Nevada economy. Dry mouth. We are in opposition to this bill. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Chair Harris and members of the Joint Committee. For the record, Christina Kleist with Brownstein here tonight representing the Latin Chamber of Commerce. Peter Guzman, the president, could not be here today to provide his testimony. We do appreciate the extensive work Assemblyman Watts has done and the efforts made to get AB 524 where it sits today. Unfortunately, the Latin Chamber of Commerce is opposed to this bill as written. We do not believe this legislation as presented today does enough to timely address energy supply shortages facing all Nevadans. We support a solution whereby Nevada can leverage opportunities to develop more in-state electricity generation resources. This additional capacity will protect Nevadans from the increasing cost of energy on the open market and risks of blackouts. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Harris.
Mr. Sanchez, I'm going to have you go last, if that's okay.
And I was just going to introduce my colleagues and turn it over to them.
Oh, it's a team effort. Okay, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair Harris. Again, Tony Sanchez, for the record, Executive Vice President of NV Energy. I'm joined today by two of my colleagues at the company, Janet Wells, who's our Vice President of Regulatory Relations and who oversees the putting together of the integrated resource planning process that you've heard so much about here today. Also joined with me is Carolyn Barbash, who's our Vice President of Transmission Policy and Development for the company. and is an acknowledged expert on Western market conditions. And so each of them will present very, very short presentations, and we'd be happy to answer any questions of the committee.
Okay, before we do that, is there anyone else here in Carson City who wants to testify in opposition? Let's get that out of the way. Okay, we're going to do opposition in Las Vegas and on the phones, and then we'll come back to you, okay? Hang tight. We'll go ahead and head down to Las Vegas. Go ahead and state your name for the record. Begin when you're ready.
For the record, my name is Anna Wood, Government Affairs Chair of the Las Vegas Asian Chamber of Commerce. Good afternoon, Co-Chairs Watts and Harris and members of the Joint Committee. I am here in opposition of AB 524. AB 524 does not address the critical need of advancing energy reliability in Nevada, which could negatively impact economic development. The entire western United States is facing a major energy reliability crisis. AB 524 ignores the urgency of this crisis and does not go far enough to insulate Nevadans from extremely high energy costs on the open market. NERC and ERC, the regulating authority that monitors the electrical grid, has issued a warning for summer reliability during periods of extreme heat. Nevada and the rest of the Southwest are at an elevated risk of rolling blackouts due to lack of available energy resources. We need to act now. The Nevada Legislature cannot ignore this problem and lack of energy supply, which the lack of energy supply poses to Nevada. AB 524 does not take this issue seriously and lacks the necessary action to protect millions of Nevadans from the risk of blackouts. Blackouts disrupt our work schedules and projects. It can send our employees and workers home from work, and they can lose pay and are exposed to health risks from lack of protection from the hot weather. It is for these reasons that I oppose AB 524. I urge the committee to oppose the bill as well. Thank you for taking the time and your consideration.
All right, thank you. Is there anyone else in Las Vegas who wants to testify in opposition? Not seeing any. BPS, can we please check the phone lines?
To testify in opposition of Assembly Bill 524, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue.
Good afternoon, chairs and members of the committees. For the record, my name is Robert Sumlin, Robert Sumlin, and I'm with the International Association of Machinists and Aerospace Workers, Local Lodge SC 711, Las Vegas, Nevada. I am here in opposition to Assembly Bill 524, and I urge the committees to oppose it as well. Thanks for your time.
Good afternoon, Co-Chairs Watts, Harris, and members of the Joint Committee. My name is Thomas Bird, capital Thomas, capital BIRD. I'm president of NARA, the Nevada Alliance for Retired Americans, with 19,000 members across Nevada and northeastern California. I'm here in opposition of AB 524 with members of NARA all over Nevada and eastern California for those in southern Nevada needing air conditioning in the summer, to those in northern Nevada and northeastern California needing AC and summer to heat in the winter months. As a senior myself, I know extreme heat in the summer or extreme cold in the winter are at times, especially in power outages, potentially life-threatening to seniors. For the reasons above, I'm opposed to AB 524 that presents an unnecessary added danger to the seniors and other elements of the population. I can't say it enough. Follow the science. Relying on market power to meet seasonal demands is dangerous for all Nevadans. This bill does not go far enough to protect customers. Thank you for your time.
I am Tony Simmons, TonySimmons. I oppose the current version of the bill because it does not adequately address the core issue is the fact that the PUC and regulatory process doesn't have the personnel to do the proper engineering analysis of NV Energy's proposal. I'd also like to comment that the joint meeting today It's quite interesting. It was 10 years ago that AB 425 was modified to warn Berkshire Hathaway that NV Energy's IRP process was broken. This is not news to Berkshire Hathaway. Thank you.
Good afternoon, co-chairs Watson Harris and members of the Joint Committee. My name is Matthew Dustin, M-A-T-T-H-E-W-D-U-S-T-I-N. I'm the Executive Director of the Southern Nevada Electrical Contractors Association. I'm here in opposition of AB 524. Nevada has the opportunity to become a clean energy leader in this country, but as drafted, AB 524 will place us in the disadvantage by creating roadblocks. If passed as is, AB 524 will slow, not accelerate the increase of Nevada's renewable energy supply. This bill will put Nevada further behind in reaching its carbon reduction goals. For those reasons, I oppose AB 524, and I urge the committee to oppose the bill as well. Thank you.
Chair, there are no other callers choosing to provide testimony in opposition at this time.
All right, thank you so much. We'll come back here to Carson City and allow you all to continue on. I'm hoping we don't have a full presentation. We will have committee members asking questions, and so you'll be able to work in thoughts and points through that as well. Okay, go ahead when you're ready.
Good afternoon, Chair Harris and members of the Joint Committee. I'm Carolyn Barbash. I'm the Vice President of Transmission Development and Policy for NV Energy, and I'm here in opposition of SB 524. Nevada, like the rest of the West, has already experienced difficulties obtaining adequate resources to serve its peak electricity demand. And this risk is increasing rapidly and has been since 2020. During the summer months, electricity demand in Nevada spikes and nearly triples the average electricity use in our state. This spike in demand leaves us nearly 3,000 megawatts short of what we have to fill in the open market. It has become more and more difficult to find energy on the open market due to retiring thermal generation, increased variable resources without accompanying storage facilities, extreme heat events, and damage from wildfire. The Western Electric Utility Council, which exists to ensure reliable operation of the Western electric grid, has issued a series of warnings over the last years, forecasting the West will experience insufficient resources during peak electricity demand over the next 10 years. Compounding this problem are actions taken by the California Electric Market Operator that blocks delivery of energy purchased for Nevadans and places a higher priority of delivering resources to meet California's large shortfall. To put that in perspective, the California market represents about 80% of the load in the west of the Rockies. NV Energy experienced multiple emergencies in 2020 and 2021, including level 3 energy emergencies, which a level 3 is the highest level energy emergency before rolling blackouts are implemented. Rolling blackouts were experienced across the U.S. in 2020, 2021, and 2022 due to lack of adequate electricity supply. During such a time of volatility in the open market, and with the increasing lack of available energy to purchase, it would be irresponsible and dangerous for Nevada to continue relying on market purchases or even entities not regulated under the jurisdiction of the Nevada Commission to meet peak summer demand. AB 524 does not insulate Nevadans from the risk and price increases that are resulting from reliance on the energy market and non-jurisdictional suppliers. For these reasons and many more, we are opposed to this bill, and we ask the committee to support opposition to 524.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, Chair Harris. Good afternoon, members of the Joint Committee.
My name is Janet Wells. I'm the Vice President of Regulatory Affairs for NV Energy, and I'm here today in opposition of Assembly Bill 524. Our heavy reliance on the open market to provide power to Nevada is both risky and costly. The average price for market purchases of energy has increased significantly over the past few years. And while NV Energy can generate a megawatt of energy for about $50, purchasing that exact same amount of energy in the open market cost more than 3 times as much in 2021 at an average of over $150 per megawatt hour for the summer months, and more than 4 times as much in 2022 at an average of over $230 a megawatt hour. This resulted in NV Energy spending over $1 billion on energy from the open market in those 2 years alone. At the peak, NV Energy was paying over $1,800 for a single megawatt hour of power in the open market. If NV Energy had generation resources that displaced the need for the market purchases, it would have saved Nevada customers over $700 million in energy costs over those same 2 years. There is a solution. Nevada can mitigate our reliance on those expensive and risky purchases and reduce the likelihood of rolling blackouts if we invest in our energy future by closing this open market position and by increasing electric generation in the state of Nevada, or utilizing transmission to bring dedicated electric generation resources into Nevada. Why is this important now? The Inflation Reduction Act has presented Nevada with an opportunity to leverage millions of dollars of federal tax benefits that will offset the investments made on renewable energy projects. And if we don't take advantage now, we lose that opportunity. And the Inflation Reduction Act provides up to 50% investment tax credit for renewable energy and storage projects. So for projects that are built by NV Energy, the Public Utilities Commission of Nevada has oversight and ensures they are built and operated in a reliable manner with the tax benefits flowing directly to our customers. As we add solar generation and battery storage with the benefits of the Inflation Reduction Act, we estimate that every 100 megawatts we build and add to our grid, we will save customers an average of $10 million a year. So we can make a significant investment in these clean energy assets under the Inflation Reduction Act and bring down the volatile fuel costs that we have now as we rely on the open market. Nevada needs a bold policy directive that increases our in-state generation resources, ramps up renewable energy projects with federal funding, and ensures we meet our renewable energy and carbon reduction goals. Please join us in advocating for Nevada's energy reliability and clean energy future, and oppose Assembly Bill 524, as it simply does not provide any clear direction to solve these real problems that are faced by Nevada. Thank you.
Okay, you got more?
Just one follow-up.
Okay,
go
go
I
ahead.
should have said this at the beginning. I apologize, Chair Harris. At the outset, do want to express our appreciation to Chairman Watts for the extensive opportunity to discuss these very pressing issues with him. We concur in all of the comments that were made about what a transparent and inclusive process it was, and we look forward to working with this committee as well as Chairman Watts' committee in the off session as these issues continue to press forward, and we concur that we're scratching the surface on a lot of the issues that need to be dealt with. But overall, there were 2 main points, I think, that were summed up by numerous supporters of the legislation, and it's our position that we feel the legislation just doesn't go far enough. The great majority of what's in Assembly Bill 524 already can be done by the utility in the context of the integrated resource planning process. Much has been made about the Commission's oversight role and responsibility under a process like this, and that is one that we concur in. This isn't about this is more about the state indicating that there should be a very strong policy statement and a policy pronouncement by the legislature, which is the legislature's role, indicating that the open position that we currently have, which is 30% of our energy in the summertime we need to buy on the open market, needs to be closed and closed quickly, because the West is in a dire state of energy emergency. Whether it's the NERC or the Western Electricity Coordinating Council, they've all come out in the last month indicating that there's a severe shortage of energy throughout the country and in particular in the West. And it is in Nevada that we are oftentimes the victim of mistakes that are made in other surrounding states. And we have seen that the last 3 summers in a row. I personally, along with my colleagues, made numerous phone calls to customers at some of the hottest times of the year, typically in September because the heat has been sticking around even longer, and asking customers to curtail. Fortunately, we have avoided those rolling blackouts, but there is a need to have a strong pronouncement from the state that we need to close that open position under the full guidance and under the full IRP process of the Public Utilities Commission. We are not advocating an abdication of that process. We're just saying the state needs to make it a priority to close that open market, and that goes to the second issue, which is affordability and rates. It is because of our purchases on the open market that we spent that $1 billion over 21 and 22 to buy energy on the open market. $724 million of it would have been unnecessary had we had more in-state resources. One could ask, why haven't we brought forth a plan already to close this open resource? The bottom line is the Inflation Reduction Act that has been passed by the federal is a game changer for us. It gives up to a 50% discount in terms of federal tax credits for investment tax credits, and that is something that we need to take advantage of. There's already been proposals to curtail those investment tax credits that have already passed, and this is an opportunity at substantial savings for our customers to not only close our open position, but do so for the benefit of Nevada energy independence. So with that, Chairwoman, we would be ready to answer any and all questions.
Okay, we'll start with Assemblyman Carter.
Thank you. We've heard a lot of talk about the volatility in the fossil fuel markets and also about air quality in districts like mine in the east side of Las Vegas. Would NV Energy support an increase in the RFP on the RPS?
Thank you, Assemblyman Carter. For the record, Tony Sanchez with NV Energy. We sit before you very proud of the record that NV Energy has in meeting the ever-changing renewable portfolio standard that goes back to 1997, which started with, I believe, if I recall, 50 rooftops. In a mandate, a very small mandate at the time, that's now grown into 50% of our energy by 2030. Under the current state of the law, we were supposed to report that we met a standard of 29% through 2022. We're very proud that we exceeded that and actually reported statewide about 37%. So we have done a fantastic job, in our opinion. Also, at the same time, without having a general rate case in the South.
Mr. Sanchez, I think that was a yes or a no question.
Yes,
and it's okay if the answer is no. But I'd just like to get there.
100%. We supported the increase to 50% by 2030 in 2019, and we would support an additional increase today. And with that inclusion in the bill, this bill is something that we would wholeheartedly support.
Lovely. Thank you. Was that it, Assemblyman Carter? Did that answer your question? Great. Assemblywoman Summers Armstrong.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Mr. Sanchez and your team for coming forward to answer questions. I'm just going to make a quick statement. The first speaker on your team made a remark about California protecting their interest and making sure that they had power that's generated within their state to serve their state. And I don't think that we should be mad about that. I think we should take an example from that. Is anything that is generated in our state, this is our home. I've said it before, Nevada is a fabulous, beautiful state, and she should be partnering with people who are looking out for her best interest. And anybody who's generating energy in our state, in my opinion, there should be some of that energy set aside for our folks. So my question is, you all aren't new to this game. Have you been working with any of our smaller generators over the last several years? We have plenty of folks who have arrays around the state that are generating energy that is not impactful to our environment. Are you developing relationships with them to get power from them to go on the grid so that you don't have this gap?
Chair Harris, through you to Assemblyman Summer Armstrong.
You can go directly.
Thank you. I feel like I need to clarify something first. When I stated that California Energy Market Operator prioritizes delivery to California, those are from outside California as well. And to give a specific example, when the Northwest Hydro is very economical, NV Energy buys some of that economical power to supplement its needs to optimize the prices for Nevadans. California, when they have a shortage, blocks deliveries of those that go through their transmission system, for which we also pay for service to be delivered, and prioritizes those deliveries to the state of California first. So it is not from energy produced in California, really, that we are being blocked from. I will say that we have been working extensively for many years on regional markets in order to get resources from other locations. And really that's because Nevada can't take full advantage of the vast solar resources we have without complementary resources from other states where Nevada is not so rich in wind and hydro and things like that. And with that, I'll let probably some of my colleagues speak to how we've worked with other suppliers to invest in solar.
And can you just restate your name for the record?
Oh, my name is Carolyn Barbash.
Thank you. Anyone have anything to add?
Again, I would just make a final note. Tony Sanchez, NV Energy. We currently have signed $20 billion worth of contracts with developers around the state of Nevada for power purchase agreements, and the vast majority of those are providing energy, and we continue to have requests for proposals seeking new generation forms. We have an increasing portfolio standard as it is. Again, we have to meet 50% standard by 2030, so we're going to continue down that road. But at the same time, we're also endeavoring to build projects and owned by our company as well. We've had several projects that were approved in our last IRP process in 2021 that were approved by the commission, signed PPAs, and we've been notified that those projects, which were supposed to come online this December, and I'm referencing well over 1,000 megawatts of battery storage and solar, will not be produced for various reasons. And so there is an immense demand for energy today. We have an economic development team at NV Energy that is constantly getting requests for whether we can serve capacity of whether it be new data centers, whether it be heavy industrial, whether it be various types of projects throughout the state. And we have literally thousands of megawatts of demand coming onto the system in the near future. But right now, because of prices and natural gas prices and what it is doing to our customers' rates that we're experiencing today, we need to wean ourselves off the open market and build more in-state resources, just like Governor Kenny Gwinn did 20 years ago with his Repower Nevada plan. And there is a misnomer that the legislature doesn't give direction to the Public Utility Commission or to, in the energy sphere. There's a long history of giving direction and mandates to the commission.
Mr. Sanchez, I don't think her question had anything to do with whether the legislature gives the PUC direction or not. And she has a follow-up. So,
Chair, I'll be happy to answer any follow-up or my colleagues.
Thank you. Assemblywoman Summers Armstrong.
Thank you. So you're frustrated. I can hear that in your voice, that some of the projects that you have online are being set aside or have been paused, and that is interfering with the demand that you are expected to supply. So, can any of our need be mitigated by working on reliability projects so that we are not losing energy to infrastructure that is not necessarily up to speed, especially in areas where I live and others, because I'm not a scientist and I don't do this for a living, but I've got a kid who's kind of a nerd, and one of the things that we've talked about many times is delivery of energy. If the infrastructure is not up to snuff, if we are using above ground wiring, we're losing the effectiveness of the transmission. And I know that many of the folks that are in the trades are concerned about what this means if we're not building new stuff. But I'm wondering, can we keep folks really, really busy improving the old stuff, replacing the old stuff that needs to be replaced because it's no longer effective?
Thank you, Assemblywoman Summers Armstrong. Tony Sanchez for the record. We share your concern over the hardening of our system within, for example, within the city limits of Las Vegas or Southern Nevada. We have, from a human resources standpoint, we have been hiring dozens of engineers. We have been hiring our lineman classes. And apprentice classes have broken records in terms of the folks that we're hiring. Our commitment and our investment that we're making in existing infrastructure is second to none in the state, and we have committed to the commission, and we're committing to the legislature that will continue, because there are certain areas that have been underinvested in. The electric vehicle program that was passed by the legislature in 2021 mandated that 40% of the $100 million we spend in electric vehicle infrastructure be spent in underinvested areas. And we're very proud that the plan that we did file with the commission, and which was approved, provides for a spending of 51% of those funds in underinvested areas, including the areas that you're referencing. So we're going to continue that. That is top of mind for us. It is not about just building high voltage transmission lines to access renewable energy projects around the state. It's also serving our existing customer base, making sure that if we have another heavy wet Sierra cement snowstorm like we had this past New Year's Eve in northern Nevada, that our equipment is up to speed. We have spent tens of millions of dollars on our NDPP program up in Lake Tahoe and Mount Charleston, those areas, redoing and inspecting lines, power poles, getting rid of the old wooden power poles and replacing those with steel, undergrounding when and where we can, and we will always continue to do that when cost is taken into account. But we are firmly committed to reinvigorating our existing system, at the same time dealing with the explosive growth that we have and that we're experiencing today.
Okay, we're going to go back to the 30-second challenge for answering questions. We've got 3 more folks, and then don't forget we still got neutral. So Assemblywoman Brown-May.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you so much for your time and dedicated efforts, and I just have to say, I appreciate that the lights are on, especially as we have this conversation. I want to talk a little bit about the PUC and gas, right, as we build out the diversification of the resources that we have. And so I'm curious to know, I don't believe that the new gas plant that was approved by the PUC is included in that integrated resource plan that was done in 2021. Can you talk a little bit about that? Would that help in ensuring the diversification of our energy supply as we continue to grow?
Good afternoon, Janet Wells. For the record, thank you, Assemblyman Brown-May, for your question. That plant was part of an amendment process and approved through an amendment process. An IRP amendment is fully vetted with participation from the staff, from the Bureau of Consumer Protection.
Would it help with the energy mix? I believe is the question.
30-second.
Yes.
Yes, it does. And in fact, it supports the addition of more renewables because it can ramp up quickly as renewables are dropping off, and it can also ramp down quickly as renewables are ramping up. So it very much helps with the diversification.
All right. Well done. Senator Hansen, unfortunately.
That was a low blow, Senator Harris. No, actually, fortunately, because what I want to get into real quick, a couple of things. One, question 3 in 2016 passed 2-1, and the idea at that time was that we were going to go the open market that you guys are posing now. 2018, we had the same exact question, complete reversal on the vote. The reason was, as I recall, is that the biggest issue was that you guys were actually using casinos and the bigger consumers to subsidize the littler guys. And there was a concern if they left the marketplace, or they left the energy grid you guys were using, that prices would go up for the little guys that everybody's talking about here. Is that still accurate?
Thank you, Senator Tony Sanchez, for the record. Question 3 obviously involved a number of different considerations. You're right, in 2018, the electorate voted it down to deregulate the system by a 70-30 margin. As you'll recall, during the debate, the majority of the proponents came in from 2 states in particular, Texas and California, both of which I would hold up as not the ideal markets for a well-integrated system that provides reliable and decarbonized electricity for their constituents.
Remember, the chair is going to jump in here in a second, and I'm going to anticipate it. Just bottom line is, if we go to open market, will the price for the smaller consumer go up or down?
I think the Texas model has shown that with a deregulated market, the catastrophes that have been experienced there over the last couple of winters, and that's something that we have absolutely avoided here in Nevada. In addition, in California, prices are 55% higher than they are here. We can compare our record both from a decarbonization standpoint and a pricing standpoint to any utility in the country.
I would love to be able to go on for a while with you, but I know we're going to have limited, because you just touched on another huge issue, and that was the 80% number that she met. They don't come anywhere near meeting their 80% consumption in California by producing in California. They're taking it from everybody else, while at the same time, anyway. The Green Link project, somebody mentioned that there's a $2.5 billion price tag to that. I guess that's part of the program to help integrate all the green energy stuff that's required now to meet your 26-30% portfolios. The complaint was, though, that you are going to use that $2.5 billion and pass it on to consumers, which I think is completely reasonable. But I'm just kind of wondering, is that number accurate that somebody mentioned earlier in the hearing? Are you guys putting $2.5 billion into a Green Link project, which then is going to go through PUC and ultimately be passed on to the cost that the consumers pay?
Carolyn Barbash for the record. Yes, we have been approved to invest $2.5 billion in the Green Link projects, and those are part of our renewable portfolio and carbon reduction plans, as well as bringing in more ability to import power into Northern Nevada, especially, more so to optimize our energy prices rather than to fill the shortfall. Because remember, to participate in an open market, you have to be resource sufficient.
Bottom line to me, though, is $2.5 billion going to be passed on in cost to the consumers, which will include all the little people who are currently seeing their rates go through the roof. Last, real quick, I promise, last question. When you guys build a green energy project, wind, solar, it still has to have almost 100% backup of some form of natural gas or some other fossil fuel-based thing, because when the sun doesn't shine, the solar projects don't work, and when the wind doesn't blow, the turbines don't turn. Is that still the case? Are you required to prevent blackout concerns to have 100% backup of natural gases or other fossil fuels for every megawatt or whatever it's called of solar or wind production that you are putting in?
Carolyn Barbash for the record. I can't speak to whether it's required, but it's common sense. Yes, because the sun isn't always shining and the wind isn't always blowing, and you have to have something to serve during those times.
Very good. So 100% green, you still have to have 100% fossil fuel to back it up. Thanks, Madam Chair.
I would like to clarify for the record, Tony Sanchez with NV Energy. It's not 100% fossil fuel. It can be battery storage. It could be pumped hydro. It could be any number of lithium battery or various battery storage. It does not, by no means, does it not have to be carbon-based.
Okay, very good. But it's still, you have to have almost a complete backup in place because those are unreliable sources. And we're talking about blackouts and making sure at peak demand we meet all those needs. So obviously you guys got to do a whole lot, almost double energy production, at least facilities-wise, to meet the whole green portfolio. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Senator Hansen, I don't think that's quite what they're saying, but I'm sure that's what you heard. Assemblywoman Dickman.
If you want me to clarify, I was trying to be brief. Believe me, there's a lot more to this than a 5-minute interview between the biggest energy producers in Nevada and what the actual impacts are going to be for the consumers of the state.
I think the committee will pass on that. Thank you. Assemblywoman Dickman.
Thank you, Chair. Appreciate it. And I think Mr. Sanchez may have answered my question when he went beyond the yes or no for Assemblyman Carter. But what can you tell me what the current ratio is of conventional resources to renewable currently?
Yes, thank you, Assemblywoman. We currently certified in 2022 that 37% of our energy is produced by a combination of geothermal, some small hydro, the majority solar, and a 150 megawatt wind project near Ely. And then we have combined cycle plants as well. And then pursuant to a mandate from this legislature in 2013, this is the 10-year anniversary of that, the legislature ordered the commission to systematically close our coal plants around the state, and we are pleased to report that our final coal plant, pursuant to that full oversight of the commission, which would be no different than a closing of the open position today, that last coal plant at Valmy is slated to close at the end of 2025.
Thank you so much. Thanks, Chair.
All right, just one last question. Is there anything in this bill that you feel is harmful? I mean, I think I heard you say everything in this bill is something you could do today, which would suggest there's no reason really to oppose it. I mean, is there anything in the bill that you think is going to harm Nevadans, even if you don't think that it's the solution to any of a number of problems you may be facing?
Thank you, Chairman Harris. Tony Sanchez for the record. The harm that we feel is going to be coming as a result of a bill that doesn't go far enough in a time of extreme Western energy emergencies. And the time is to act today, and we would prefer a very strong pronouncement and mandate that the state and the Utility Commission work with all parties through the full supervision, through the integrated resource planning process at the Commission, and work to close that open position as quickly as possible and wean ourselves off of a lot of problems that have been caused by our neighbor to the west. And so while, and as I indicated in response to another question, if there were a mandate like increasing the RPS standard, if that were added to this bill, that would be the component that would require us to go ahead and close that open position, and that would be palatable with us and we think would go a long way to protecting Nevadans, both from a price standpoint but from a reliability standpoint, and help us as we continue to decarbonize our system. In the last 15 years, we have decarbonized our system 55%. Again, we'll hold that standard up to any utility in the country. Our pricing, over the last 20 years, we've had fewer price increases as a utility than any state in the nation, and those are charts that are currently on the PUCN's website, and our reliability statistics, while there are certainly instances where we need to improve, and we're rapidly doing that, our reliability is the envy of many states around the country as well.
Okay, thank you. We'll go ahead and close out this portion of the hearing and head to neutral testimony. Anyone here in Carson City to give neutral testimony? And I'll ask Mr. Figueroa and Mr. Weir to go last because we're going to do another round of this. All right, go ahead.
Good evening, Chair and members of the committee. For the record, my name is Cassie Charles, and I'm the campaign director with the Progressive Leadership Alliance of Nevada, here in neutral on AB 524, and I promise to be brief. Utility bills are way too high right now for working families across Nevada, and working families across Nevada are struggling. The status quo has allowed large utilities to fast-track expensive gas plants and less than consumer-friendly public processes, and push costs back on ratepayers. We appreciate that this bill includes increased transparency and community input in the process, but believe that we need to focus our efforts on holding our utilities accountable. We need to work towards a fossil-free Nevada and think that our most vulnerable communities as we pass energy policy. Please consider the long-term cost of business as usual on our family budgets, as well as the cost on greater health, air, water, and community. Thank you.
Good afternoon. For the record, I am Ernest Figueroa.
Mr. Figueroa, I'm going to have you go last.
Thank you, Chair Harris. I'm here.
Oh, lovely. Just kidding. Okay. NV Energy's not the only one who brought a team, huh? All right, go ahead, Mr. Figueroa.
For the record, I am Ernest Figueroa, Consumer Advocate, Chief Deputy Attorney General. I am here to testify in the neutral position for AB 524. First, like all my other colleagues, I would like to extend my deepest gratitude to Chair Watts for his thoughtful deliberation on this very important piece of energy legislation. The chair held stakeholder meetings and took valuable input, not just from me, but from all interested stakeholders in shaping this piece of legislation. Second, while this legislation does allow an electric utility to file more general rate cases besides every 3 years, with some limitations, this provision could have an impact to the BCP and its resources. And I intend to file, if it has not been done already, an unsolicited fiscal note in the event additional future resources are necessary due to this legislation. And then finally, I just want to add that I believe that it's important to note that AB 524, as drafted, allows full vetting by the Public Utilities Commission of Nevada and allows them to make findings concerning what it is in the public interest when setting just and reasonable rates. This is a very important component of this legislation that some want undone and do not like. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Harris and members of the committee. For the record, Garrett Weir, General Counsel for the Public Utilities Commission. I would like to echo many others in expressing our appreciation and praise for Assemblyman Watts' work in overseeing a stakeholder process that allowed for thoughtful deliberation of energy policy proposals related to resource planning. Ultimately, that process has yielded a bill that provides legislative directives, but also preserves crucial processes that protect customers and promote reliability through prudent planning. Given that the PUCN will be tasked with implementing this bill, I'd be happy to answer any questions regarding its effects, and I can speak to the existing IRP process and also address anything that you've heard here today from others. I guess I'll ask the chair for guidance on whether I should address some of what I've heard and hope to provide clarification there, or to maybe streamline the process, just respond to questions that I'm asked.
Why don't we take questions, and then if there's anything you feel that was important that you didn't get out, we'll let you back clean up. All right, we'll start with Assemblywoman Peters.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have 2 questions, if I may, directed, for you. Okay, so first of all, how much of our electricity comes from natural gas, and is any of that imported into the state?
Thank you. For the record, Garrett Weir, Chair Harris, through you to Assemblywoman Peters.
You can go directly.
Thank you. So I would have to get exact numbers for you. I think last I saw it was something like 70+% is gas generation, but I could be wrong on that. So I can follow up with more exact numbers. whether, or as to the source of the natural gas, I mean, it would all be imported from out of state because, or with the exception of maybe some renewable natural gas that, but I don't know if that's used for the extent to which that's used. But I mean, the vast majority of natural gas is going to be imported from out of state, as we don't have very much production in state.
70%. Oof. All right. Okay. My second question is related to NV Energy's proposing and building more clean energy resources. Can they do that above the RPS requirements, or are there restrictions against them pursuing projects that put them above that RPS requirement?
Thank you for the record, Garrett Weir. So, yeah, two different things. I guess the resource planning process allows for the utility to propose whatever it thinks is appropriate to address the needs, the demand for energy on the system. So, and with regard to renewable energy resources, the RPS is simply a floor. It's not a ceiling. So we can certainly entertain proposals for more renewable energy resources to address the open position. Those proposals, though, would simply be subject to comparison to other scenarios. Everything would be vetted for the relative cost effectiveness because, again, as we've heard from others, the process is intended to result in not just reliable service but also affordable service to the extent possible. So, you know, in looking at supply options, that's what the resource planning process does. Importantly, I think this bill, as I read it, as it would be implemented by the Commission, it would not in any way, and I want to be clear about this, prioritize market purchases or reliance on the market over you know, in-state build or other supply options. It would simply allow for all options to be vetted and the pros and cons and relative benefits to be evaluated by the Commission, and it provides a forum for all affected stakeholders to weigh in and vet the proposal. And I mean, we're talking about billions of dollars of costs that will ultimately be paid for by the captive customers of the utility.
Assemblywoman Brown-May.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Mr. Weir. I appreciate that you're here. Can you talk a little bit and quickly about the reliability, and are there projects that are currently pending to specifically address reliability for the energy infrastructure?
Thank you. For the record, Garrett Weir. I'll try to be quick. This does allow me to address some of the statements that were made previously. I think we've heard the situation characterized as an extreme emergency for reliability. There was reference to the report from the North American Electric Reliability Corporation, you know, suggesting that we're in a uniquely bad position. Actually, I mean, my takeaway from reading that report is that we're relatively well positioned compared to the rest of the country. There are risks, as there always are in the summer, and if a lot of things go wrong, maybe, you know, we could be in trouble, but that is the case for everyone, and we're relatively well positioned, especially compared to prior summers. You asked whether there have been measures taken by the Commission and by the utility. Absolutely, and that the integrated resource planning process allows that. There was a request recently for the gas project that you mentioned, the Silverhawk combustion turbine facilities, which received approval in, I think, less than 3 months. That's extraordinary, you know, that occurred so quickly. And that was for the purpose of ensuring reliability. To be clear, the Commission has not heard about this extreme emergency, this concern to this extent from the utility in the proceedings before the Commission. There has been no evidence presented to the Commission that we should be worried about the sufficiency of the plan that we've approved, the plan that the utility largely proposed, the open position that the utility proposed and stipulated to. So, you know, we are hopeful that if there is an emergency that needs to be addressed and that the existing approved plan is inadequate, that the utility would come forward with a proposal that would allow us to address those concerns.
Thank you, Mr. Weir. I appreciate that. We heard Mr. Sanchez say that he didn't feel like the bill went far enough, and excuse me for paraphrasing because I didn't write that down fast enough. But looking for more direct response in the beliefs of the legislative body that we need to build the infrastructure and have the support. So he was looking for more intent. Is there a way, in your opinion, to do that while maintaining the flexibility required by the PUCN to be able to vet those projects in this bill going forward?
Thank you. For the record, Garrett Weir. My reading of the bill is that it does provide direction that emphasizes the need to for the plan to demonstrate, reduced reliance on market purchases, everything that the commission would need between this direction from the legislation, which again, it prescribes the contents of a plan that aren't currently required. We have regulations that have certain requirements of a plan, but there is additional information that this directs to be included, and that would assist the commission in prioritizing, that information and making sure to consider it without predetermining the outcome. Because again, there could be many ways to get to reliable, affordable service. It may not just be the plan that the utility puts forward.
Okay, Senator Hammond.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I do believe the two questions I had were probably asked just now, unless
Lovely.
of course.
Senator Hansen.
No,
I'm just kidding.
Unless, of course, Mr. Weir, I know you're very concerned about keeping the lights on. We're all concerned about, obviously, there's several questions about the blackouts that might occur, especially in certain communities. You addressed some of the tools that you have to try and mitigate that. Is there any additional tools that you may have, you may want to talk about a little bit right now that allow you to make sure that we can reliably sure that we're going to have the lights on over the summer?
Sure. Thank you. For the record, Garrett Weir. There are various types of supply options that can ensure reliability or assist in meeting resource sufficiency showing requirements for regional entities. One of those things, in addition to company-owned generation or power purchase agreements, you can also arrange for priority transmission or priority wheel through, California or from other destinations. So we heard about concerns about curtailment through California because of certain rules or, in periods of high demand. But the reality is, last summer, we only saw 349 megawatts of curtailment and no curtailment of priority imports from out of state. And so, again, that just requires a 45-day, advanced scheduling. And we saw zero curtailment. The risk is very low that we would be that we couldn't rely on those resources. And for the purposes of meeting those resource sufficiency showings, those are adequate. So we would compare those sorts of alternatives to, where we would pay for it for 3 months maybe in the summer versus investing in building something that maybe we don't need for the majority of the year. Again, we don't know how that pencils out, but those are the types of comparisons that we would see put before us. And just to provide some scale, the 349 megawatts, that's, just for context, we have approved to come online in the next year, and the utility, is developing, or contracting for over 1,000 megawatts of new capacity. So, there's new capacity in the pipeline. Obviously, reliability is a high priority, and as we see any sort of evidence that we need to invest further in capacity, we will certainly evaluate that.
Thank you. I think that is very helpful. A lot of tools that you have right now. Thank you.
Senator Hansen.
Thanks, Madam Chair. You kind of just undermined the purpose of the bill, though. You just said you basically are already doing all the stuff that's going on in the bill. You got all these energy projects in the pipeline, all the things that we've thrown at you guys that we have apparently didn't think you were doing, you are already doing. I'm kind of wondering what in the bill is there that you don't do currently?
Thank you for the record, Garrett Weir. Well, one of the requirements in the bill directs the utility to come in with a plan that does the things that the utility is saying that it wants done. As I said earlier, we haven't seen that plan. That proposal hasn't come before us. So this directs the utility, this bill does, to actually come forward with that proposal. Secondly, as we heard from a lot of the stakeholders, there has been frustration with some of the resource planning procedure, the processes, the extent to which amendments are used, the frequency of amendments, the size of amendments. So it would certainly provide direction to the commission and to do something that the commission hasn't done yet, which is address or place restrictions on the usage of amendments versus, a more robust IRP filing. And then finally, the last thing is that the utility would be able to more frequently come in for rate cases.
Good. So there's some good points to the bill then. Good. Okay. Next question: cost per kilowatt or whatever you measure it. There were some questions. Right now, I know when Mineral County was in my district, we built a beautiful solar power plant there. Found out that 100% of that power was being sold into the California market. And I asked why. They said, frankly, the cost to produce it is so great that it's not viable on the Nevada market. What is the difference in costs currently between that? I don't know if whoever can answer this, if at all, the cost between a natural gas kilowatt versus a solar kilowatt versus a wind generated, whatever it may be. In my mind, I'm kind of wondering, as the consumer advocate, my idea of what the consumer advocate should be all about is keeping costs as reasonably low as possible while keeping the supply steady. Yet we're seeing a constant escalation in costs and all these things. So I'm kind of wondering which of the various forms of energy that we can use to generate electricity is the most cost efficient, and the ones that are being put into the pipeline, the green ones, what is their cost per kilowatt or whatever the measurement is?
For the record, Garrett Weir. So that cost vetting occurs in the resource planning process. I don't have, the latest specific numbers for you, but as you mentioned, there's a lot that goes into it. In a prior exchange, you mentioned, backup. Well, there are different types of resources. Some are intermittent, some, aren't. That said, solar generation, if you're wanting a comparison on the actual production, it's by far our cheapest resource. You're just talking, 2 or 3 cents at some of it per kilowatt hour that we've been able to procure in the past. But yeah, as we reach the point of needing more of the production later in the day, there's associated storage that goes with that. We also have requirements for RPS compliance, so that's part of it. But we look at all of these factors in comparing resources and determining what the appropriate solution is. And it's a complicated, sophisticated process. And
oh my God, I'm actually complimenting you. I just think PUC does an amazing job. The backup thing, I do want to, last before Mr. Figueroa kicks in here, do you guys have a requirement for backup? If we went 100% solar tomorrow, would you require, I mentioned 100% and the chair got a laugh out of it, but what is actually the backup requirement, if any, now for fully reliable production?
For the record, Garrett Weir, I don't think we have a direct backup requirement. It's just that generation can be stored at times if we don't need it when there's the production, and then we can dispatch it later. So storage acts as its own resource when we're able to basically store renewable energy in those systems. So I don't know what the percentage would be, but it's basically just a resource that's available to us to meet the system demands when the sun isn't shining.
I'll talk to Mr. Sanchez later about the storage aspect. I'm kind of curious, how much do they actually have available to store versus how much they need to produce in that blackout window, which is the peak window we're all worried about. I'm sorry, Mr. Figueroa, cut in. You were going to answer the question on what's the best deal for the consumer.
Ernest Figueroa for the record. That's one of our biggest considerations as we vet these projects during the integrated resource process. I could actually provide you with that information probably as soon as tomorrow.
Excellent.
Specifically. And maybe I'll provide it to the entire committee.
It'd be wonderful. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, Assemblywoman Kasama.
Thank you, Chair. I'll be quick. I'm just curious the whole process too, how it works. Has in the past, has the legislature given specific direction to PUCB for how to handle things? And if so, maybe you could give me an example.
Sure. For the record, Garrett Weir. So most recently, last session, there was a bill, SB 448, I believe the bill sponsors in the audience, and that proposal was more prescriptive in that it addressed something that is relatively unique or distinct from energy supply options. It's transmission, where a lot of the arguments for that project were speculative. It was, that we need to build this to be able to then show the benefits. There were a lot of field of dreams analogies of if you build it, they will come. And that sort of speculative analysis doesn't often result in an approval of a plan at the commission. And, there was, I think, interest in taking that leap and making that investment, and that was legislatively prescribed, and that's an example. I think it's distinguishable from supply planning, generation assets, which is more, the bread and butter of what the commission does as far as comparing options. But that's one example, certainly.
Can I add to that? Hi, Ernest Figueroa for the record. If I had to describe the process of the legislator mandating something, I would describe it as this. It is akin to putting the thumbs on one scale, the scales of justice, tying the hands of the commission, and tying my hands, preventing me from making arguments to protect the ratepayers at the commission. Thank you.
All right. That's all the questions we have for now. Committee members, if additional questions come up, please feel free to reach out to Mr. Figueroa, Mr. Weir, anyone else on their teams. I'm sure they'd be happy to field those questions from you all. We will go to neutral testimony in Las Vegas. It doesn't look like we have anyone. BPS, can we check the phone, please, for anyone who'd like to testify in the neutral position on AB 524?
To testify in neutral to AB 524, please press *9 now to take your place in the queue.
Good evening, Chair, members of the committee. Amber Stidham with the Las Vegas Global Economic Alliance. We also appreciate all of Chair Watts' work and support many aspects of this proposal. We're only testifying in neutral, much of which has been discussed already, as ideally LVGEA would like to see there be an emphasis that looks into opportunities for in-state generation to create energy supply and reduce the need to purchase energy from the open market. This is a focus we believe could also afford Nevadans, including the businesses and industries that we work to recruit to our region, to have the access to reliable energy sources, which is really ultimately what we believe results in reliable costs. Thanks.
Good afternoon, chairs and members of the committee. Chairwoman Harris, I want to apologize up front because I know we're on neutral, but I'm actually calling to get on the record in opposition. I called earlier and I was overlooked, so I followed the process. Broadcast asked me to call in now. So with your permission, I'd like to go on the record.
Yes, that's absolutely fine. Just don't forget to state your name.
I will not. Thank you so much. I appreciate the opportunity. My name is Liz Sorensen. That's L-I-Z. Last name is S-O-R-E-N-S-O-N, and I am the president of the Nevada State AFL-CIO. I'm here this evening in opposition of Assembly Bill 524, and I urge the committees to oppose it as well. Thank you so much for the opportunity. I felt compelled, since I represent workers all day long, to have their voices be heard. I needed to have mine heard, so I appreciate you allowing me to do that.
Absolutely. Thanks for joining us. BPS, do we have anyone else on the phone line who'd like to testify in neutral?
If you'd like to testify in neutral, please press star 9 now. There are no other callers choosing to testify in neutral at this time.
Okay. Chair Watts, as much as I would love to invite you up for closing comments, I'm not going to. We're going to go ahead and close out the hearing on AB 524 and jump right into public comment. Anyone here in Carson City for public comment? Las Vegas? BPS, can we check the phones, please?
To provide public comment, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. There are no callers choosing to provide public comment at this time.
Okay, with that, ladies and gentlemen, this joint meeting is adjourned. Have a great night.